I am telling this because keeping it inside is worse than saying it out loud. My name is not important, but my son's name was Eddie, and he was 10 years old when this happened. He was curious, stubborn, and always distracted by animals, especially dogs. That day, we went shopping after school to buy shoes and a jacket. Nothing special, just another routine afternoon. The shopping area was busy but normal, with people walking fast and cars stopping and starting near the sidewalks. Eddie stayed close to me at first, walking beside the cart, asking questions I barely answered because I was tired and focused on finishing quickly. I remember checking prices and thinking about dinner, not paying enough attention to anything else. Near the parking lot entrance, Eddie stopped walking. A stray dog was sitting near a trash bin, calm and quiet with dirty fur and soft eyes. The dog looked friendly, but what caught my attention was how he was watching Eddie. The dog stood up slowly and took 2 steps closer, close enough that I could see its eyes clearly. They were too focused, fixed on Eddie without blinking. The dog did not bark, did not move its head, and did not react to the noise around us. Eddie crouched and smiled, already asking if we could take it home. I told him no right away and pulled the cart forward. I said it was not safe and that we did not have time. He followed me slowly, turning around to look at the dog again, and I did not stop to make sure he was still right behind me. As we moved forward, I looked back once. The dog had not followed us, but it had turned its head and was still staring in our direction, completely still as if waiting. Inside the store, everything felt normal for a few minutes. I stood in line, paid for the shoes, and listened to the cashier talk about discounts I did not care about. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but I ignored it because I wanted to leave. When I turned around to tell Eddie we were done, he was not there. At first, I thought he had stepped a few feet away, maybe to look at toys or displays near the entrance. I called his name in a normal voice and waited. Nothing happened. I walked toward the door and looked outside, expecting to see him standing near the car or the sidewalk. He was nowhere. My breathing started to change as I walked faster, calling his name louder, checking every corner he could have reached. I asked employees if they had seen a boy in a blue hoodie. They all shook their heads. The noise around me grew louder, and my hands started shaking as I realized too much time had passed. At the edge of the park, I saw the narrow alley between 2 buildings. It led away from the street, dark, even during the afternoon. I did not want to go there, but my body moved before I could stop it. Before stepping into the alley, I stopped and listened, trying to hear anything familiar, but there were no voices and no footsteps coming from inside. My heart was beating so hard I could feel it in my throat, and my hands were wet with sweat as I took a step forward. A few meters in, I saw one of Eddie's sneakers lying on the ground. It was on its side, still tied, not thrown, not crushed. My stomach dropped and my legs felt weak as I picked it up. The shoe was warm, and that detail made my chest tighten because it meant he had been there moments before. From that moment, fear took control. My thoughts became loud and messy, and I could not slow them down. I started calling his name over and over, louder each time, my voice breaking as I moved deeper into the alley without thinking about danger. At the end of the alley, something was moving. At first, my mind tried to force the image into something familiar, and I recognized the same color of the dog, the same shape of the head, and the same bent ear. The dog stood up, taller than any person. Its body twisted and wrong with legs bent backwards and shoulders in a way no dog should. The creature turned toward me and I saw the same eyes I had seen earlier, unchanged, fixed and focused. Its mouth was wider now, its teeth wrong, chewing slowly with blood running down its chin. I froze because my body refused to move, and fear became heavy and sharp, pressing down on me until breathing felt like work. The thing turned toward me, chewing slowly, blood covering its mouth, not rushing, not hiding. Before it moved, my vision blurred and my ears rang as panic took full control. I recognized the fur, the color, and the shape of the head, and that realization hit me harder than fear itself. This was the same dog my son had touched minutes earlier, the same one that had waited quietly near the trash bin. My body reacted late because part of my brain still tried to reject what my eyes were seeing. The creature suddenly rushed forward, faster than I expected, its movements heavy and certain like it already knew I could not stop it. As it closed the distance, I saw its face clearly, stretched and wrong, but with the same fixed eyes that had stared at Eddie in the parking lot. I felt a sharp, tearing pain as its claws ripped into my forearm, pulling skin and flesh apart with force, and the impact sent me crashing hard against the wall. I fell to the ground screaming, pressing my back against the cold surface, watching it pass me instead of finishing the attack. As it moved away, it spat something onto the ground near my feet. It was a small plastic dinosaur, dirty and wet, one I recognized instantly, and that moment broke something inside me because there was no doubt left about what it had done. My body shook uncontrollably as blood soaked through my sleeve and my arm burned and throbbed with every heartbeat. I tried to stand and failed, my legs refusing to support my weight. I dragged myself forward using one arm, crying loudly, calling Eddie's name again and again, even though I already knew there would be no answer. The creature ran toward the street, dropping to all fours as it moved, its steps louder and heavy, moving exactly like the animal it had pretended to be before. I heard distant screams and sudden car horns as it disappeared, leaving me bleeding and broken in the alley, unable to follow and unable to look away from what it had left behind. Before the ambulance arrived, I sat on the curb shaking violently, unable to stop crying or focus on the voices around me. My arm was wrapped in cloth, but blood kept seeping through, and every movement sent pain through my body. The police asked questions while the medics worked, speaking quickly and calmly as if this was normal. I tried to explain what I saw, struggling to find words, my voice weak and uneven. When I described the creature, their expressions changed, and they stopped writing. They searched the alley and found blood. Too much to explain, but they did not find Eddie. The word missing followed every report, every call, every update. No one said dead, but no one said alive either. Days turned into weeks filled with interviews, searches, and posters. I replayed every second in my head, blaming myself for looking away, for saying no to the dog without holding his hand, for not noticing sooner that he was gone. At night, my arm ached, and the scar pulled and burned for no reason. Sleep became short and shallow, filled with images I could not escape. Eddie was declared missing, not dead, and that word follows me everywhere I go. I moved away and changed everything I could, but nothing feels safe anymore. I avoid dogs. I can't look at their eyes, and I watch children closely, even when they are not mine.
Carol and I wanted to go on a weekend getaway, somewhere quiet. We were driving on a rural highway late at night. I was tired, but I didn't say it out loud. Carol had been looking forward to this trip for months, and I didn't want to ruin it before it even started. The road was narrow with no lights, no houses, and no signs for miles. Just asphalt, fields, and darkness. The engine noise was steady, but every bump made me grip the wheel harder. Carol leaned back in her seat, scrolling through photos she had saved for the trip, talking about places we'd stop at. I answered when I had to, but my attention stayed on the road. We hadn't seen another car in a long time. That alone made me uneasy, even if I didn't fully admit it to myself. There's something about being completely alone on a road that makes every decision feel heavier. Stopping, speeding up, even changing lanes feels like it matters more than usual. And that's when the headlights caught a small figure on the side of the road. At first, I thought it was an animal. My foot eased off the gas without me thinking about it. As we got closer, the shape didn't move away. It stood upright, too still, right at the edge of the asphalt. Carol leaned forward, squinting through the windshield. It was a child. A boy, alone, barefoot, wearing clothes that didn't match the cold air. He didn't wave or step back. He just watched the car approach, his arms hanging straight down like he was waiting for something to happen. Before stopping, there was a long second where neither of us spoke. I felt my chest tighten and my hands started to sweat on the steering wheel. Every instinct told me this was a bad idea, but I ignored it because the alternative felt worse. I pulled over. The boy climbed into the back seat without hesitation. He didn't ask if it was okay. He didn't say thank you. He sat straight, his hands on his knees, his eyes fixed forward. When he spoke, his voice was flat and slow, like he was repeating words he had learned recently. He said his mom was coming. The silence after that felt wrong. Not quiet in a peaceful way, but heavy, like we were all holding our breath. I checked the mirror again and again. The boy's eyes never left me. He didn't blink, not once. My skin started to crawl, and I felt my heart picking up speed. Carol tried to talk to him, asking him where he came from and where his mom was. His answers were short and off. He didn't explain anything. He didn't react the way kids usually do. No fear, no confusion, no emotion at all. Just words, spaced out, carefully placed. Before anything happened, there was a stretch of road that felt endless. The darkness ahead seemed thicker, even though nothing had changed. I realized I was holding my breath and forced myself to breathe again. My hands were shaking now, and I tightened my grip on the wheel to hide it. The boy finally said his mom was close. He said she was running. I asked how she could keep up with the car. He didn't answer. Carol turned to look at him, and that's when he smiled. His eyes blinked, one at a time. His breathing became shallow without me noticing. His shoulders were tight, almost locked in place, and my jaw hurt from watching him clench his. I kept adjusting my grip on the wheel because my palms were slick with sweat. Every few seconds I checked the mirrors again, even though nothing new appeared. Carol noticed my tension and asked if I was okay, but my voice came out stiff when I answered. I didn't feel okay, and my body reacted faster than my thoughts could keep up. My stomach dropped hard, and fear hit me all at once. Not panic, not screaming fear, but the kind that makes your body go cold. I looked back at the road, and my foot pressed down on the gas without me deciding to do it. In the headlights, something appeared behind us, low to the ground, fast, moving in a way that made no sense. It ran on all fours, but its body didn't move like an animal. Its head stayed level, locked on the car, while the rest of it stretched and contracted with each step. Before the impact, everything sharpened. The sound of the engine, Carol breathing fast, my own pulse pounding in my ears. I could feel how weak we were inside that car, how thin the doors suddenly felt. The thing opened its mouth as it ran. I saw teeth meant to tear, not chew. The boy in the back seat let out a short laugh, and his body started to change. His limbs bent wrong, his shape shifted, skin pulling tight over moving bone. I swerved, too late. As the creature closed the distance, my vision narrowed. I couldn't focus on anything except the shape behind us and the road directly ahead. My arms felt weak, like they might stop responding at any moment, and I had to force them to keep steering straight. My foot pressed harder on the gas, my leg trembling from the effort. Carol grabbed the handle above the door, her knuckles turning white, her breathing fast and uneven. The car left the road and crashed hard into the ditch. Metal screamed, glass shattered, and my head slammed forward. When I came back to myself, everything hurt, and the world felt tilted. Carol was screaming my name, and that sound snapped me into motion. Before I could reach her, weight slammed into the hood. The windshield cracked under the pressure, spreading lines across the glass. The creature's face pressed close, its features twisted, stretched into something almost human, but not enough to be mistaken. It ripped the passenger door open and grabbed Carol. She fought, kicking and clawing, her fear loud and real. I tried to move faster, but my leg wouldn't work right. I dragged myself across the seat, useless, watching every second pass. The creature pulled her out onto the road. I heard her head hit the asphalt. I screamed until my throat burned. Then headlights flooded everything, and a pickup truck hit the creature at full speed. Bone broke. The impact threw it into the trees. At the edge of the forest, the boy stood watching, his face twisted in panic before he ran into the dark. Pain shot through my leg when I tried to stand, sharp and immediate, making me gasp out loud. My hands slipped on the seat fabric as I dragged myself forward, every movement slow and clumsy. I could feel my heart slamming against my ribs, hard enough to hurt. My mouth was dry, my tongue heavy, and I couldn't form words fast enough to call Carol's name again as she was pulled farther away from me. People arrived quickly after that. Sirens, voices, hands pulling me away from the wreck. Carol was alive, barely, her body torn and bleeding. I couldn't stop shaking, even when they wrapped a blanket around me. They asked questions. I answered some of them, not all. The story became an animal attack. Everyone agreed on that because it was easier. The driver swore he hit a deer. No one argued. No one searched the forest for long. No body was found. No explanation was needed. I knew better, but I stayed quiet. Carol survived, but parts of that night are gone from her memory. Doctors say trauma does that. I don't correct them. It's better this way. I don't drive on rural highways anymore. I avoid empty roads. I avoid places where help is far away. I stay where people are, even if I don't talk to them.
My friends Leon and Sean and I wanted to go to the woods for a few days to clear our minds and have new adventures. We went to a much more remote forest about which there are several urban legends, but that's the case with almost all forests, and we didn't believe in those things. The road to the camping area was narrow and poorly marked. There were no other cars, no cabins, no signs of recent activity. Our phones lost signal long before we arrived. I noticed it and felt uneasy, but I didn't say anything. I didn't want to be the one who complained over nothing. We set up camp quickly. 2 tents, the fire pit, a small table. The forest around us looked normal, but it felt empty. No animals, no distant movement. I told myself it was just a quiet place. As night fell, we sat near the fire and talked about random things. Work, old stories, plans that didn't matter. I kept glancing at the trees without realizing it. I wasn't scared yet, but I wasn't comfortable either. When the fire started to fade, Sean asked who wanted to get more wood. Leon stood up immediately and grabbed the flashlight. He didn't hesitate. He didn't even look back at us. He just walked toward the trees and disappeared into the dark. At first I wasn't worried. A few minutes passed, then more. I called his name once, then again. There was no answer. Sean joked that Leon was probably trying to scare us. I didn't laugh. We walked closer to the trees, calling out louder. The flashlight beam from Leon was gone. The forest stayed silent. That silence began to feel heavy, like it was pressing down on us. We waited longer than we should have. When we finally heard something, it wasn't a voice calling back. It was a low, broken sound, uneven and strained, coming from deeper in the woods. We followed the sound together, moving slowly. My hands were shaking and my chest felt tight. I kept thinking that whatever we were about to find wasn't going to be simple or easy. We found Leon on the ground near a fallen tree. The moment I saw him, panic hit me hard. His clothes were torn. His skin was scraped and dirty. His face looked swollen, wrong in a way I couldn't ignore. He was alive, but barely responsive. Sean dropped beside him, calling his name over and over. Leon tried to speak, but the words came out slow and broken. His breathing was uneven, and his eyes wouldn't focus properly. I felt sick just looking at him. Getting him back to camp was difficult. He leaned heavily on us, barely able to stand. Every step made him let out weak sounds of pain. My heart was racing and I kept turning around, afraid something would come out of the trees behind us. Before anything else happened, there was a stretch of time where everything felt frozen. Leon sat on the ground wrapped in a blanket, shaking. The fire crackled weakly. The forest stayed quiet, too quiet, like it was holding its breath. A noise came from behind the camp, slow and uneven, like someone moving carefully. Fear hit me instantly, sharp enough to make my stomach drop. I looked at Sean, then at the injured Leon on the ground. Leaving them felt wrong, but staying felt worse. I told Sean not to move and stepped toward the sound. I walked into the trees with the flashlight shaking in my hand. My breathing was loud, rushed, and completely out of control. Every few steps I stopped, listening, forcing myself forward even though my legs felt weak. Then someone stepped into the light. It was Leon, clean, unharmed, standing upright. My mind locked up, unable to process what I was seeing. Relief and confusion crashed together so hard it made me dizzy. He spoke fast, explaining that he had gotten lost, that something chased him deep into the woods, something that didn't move right. He said he hid, ran, and kept moving until he was sure it was gone. His voice shook, and this time it sounded real. I told him we already found him and that he was hurt back at camp. Leon's face changed immediately. Fear replaced confusion. He grabbed my arm and told me that wasn't possible. He said the thing following him could copy voices and shapes. His grip was weak, his hand trembling badly. He tried to move faster, but his legs gave out. He stumbled, breathing hard, barely able to stay standing. I didn't stop. I pulled my arm free and ran. Sean screamed. I ran alone, branches hitting my face and arms as I pushed through the trees. Leon shouted my name behind me, his voice breaking, telling me to stop, telling me not to go back. He couldn't keep up. The scream from the camp drowned everything else. When I reached the firelight, the scene was already destroyed. The blanket lay empty on the ground. Sean was on his knees, dragging himself backward in the dirt. The thing that had been sitting with us wore Leon's face, but its body moved wrong now. Joints bending too far, head tilted unnaturally. Sean tried to scream again, but the sound cut off when the creature grabbed him by the throat. I shouted without thinking, throwing a rock that hit its shoulder and did nothing. It turned its head toward me slowly, eyes calm and focused. There was a brief pause where everything felt unbearably clear. Sean's legs kicked weakly. The creature's skin shifted, struggling to stay in shape. Then it released him and charged toward me. I stumbled and fell hard, knocking the air out of my lungs. It was on me immediately, heavy and cold, pressing me into the ground. Its face was inches from mine, skin stretched tight, mouth opening wider than it should. I hit the ground hard, the air leaving my lungs in dry gasps. The creature was on me immediately, its weight crushing my chest, pinning my arms uselessly against the dirt. I couldn't push it away. I couldn't reach for anything. My hands slipped on the ground as I tried to move, panic flooding my body so fast I couldn't think. Its face was inches from mine, wearing Leon's features stretched too tight, eyes fixed on me without emotion. Its mouth opened wider than it should have, and a wet, uneven sound came from deep inside its throat. I kicked blindly, my heel scraping against its leg, doing nothing to slow it down. I knew with absolute clarity that I was not strong enough to stop it. A sound behind it pulled its attention away. The real Leon screamed my name from the edge of the trees. The creature froze for a second, then slowly lifted its weight off me. I didn't wait to understand why. I rolled onto my side and crawled away, my body shaking so badly I could barely move. The creature turned away from me and grabbed Sean's body, dragging him across the ground toward the trees. It didn't rush, it didn't struggle. It took her like it had already decided this is how it would end. I forced myself up and ran, grabbing Leon as he stumbled toward me. We reached the car without looking back. The engine started after a short delay that felt endless. As I drove, I saw movement between the trees and the mirror, slow and steady, watching us leave. Sean was never found. The official report said he got lost. No one searched long enough to find anything else. Leon survived, but he is not the same. He panics when someone calls his name from behind. Once he told me he heard his own voice calling to him while he was hiding. I think about how calmly it sat with us, how patient it was. Whatever took Sean learned enough, and it knows how to wait. I'm sure it will attack again, but not me.
I stayed home because work did not stop for holidays, and someone had to cover the late shift that week. My wife took the kids to visit her family, and I helped load the car without complaining because staying alone sounded easier than traveling with noise and obligations. When they left, the house felt empty, but manageable, like a place waiting to be used properly. I ordered food I usually do not eat, turned on the TV, and planned to stay awake late without worrying about anyone else. I walked through the house once, locking doors and windows, not because I was afraid, but because it was routine. The cameras were on, the alarm was set, and everything looked normal on the screens. I sat on the couch and tried to relax, but silence is never fully quiet when you are alone. Every sound stands out more, even the harmless ones. I told myself it was fine and focused on the screen, forcing my attention to stay there. The night was supposed to pass without any interruption, without any reason to remember it later. I had no idea how fast that plan would fall apart. The doorbell rang once, sharp and loud, and I froze on the couch instead of standing up. I muted the TV and listened, hoping it would stop and prove it was nothing. It rang again, longer this time, followed by a fist hitting the door hard enough to shake it. I opened the camera feed instead of the door. A young woman stood outside, crying so hard her face was twisted and red. She kept turning her head, scanning the street behind her, shaking like she could barely stay upright. She screamed for help and begged whoever was inside to open the door. I hesitated because everything about the situation felt wrong. But then I thought about my daughter. I imagined her alone, terrified, begging a stranger for help while someone watched her from the dark. That thought pushed past my doubt and made the decision for me. I unlocked the door and opened it. She rushed inside, nearly knocking me over, and screamed for me to close it. I slammed the door shut and locked it while my heart started racing faster than it should have. Before she spoke clearly, the tension in the room climbed fast and heavy, pressing into my chest until breathing felt harder than it should. She paced back and forth, rubbing her arms and neck like something was crawling on her skin, and she could not stay still for more than a second. She told me they were after her, that they were close, and her voice cracked every time she tried to explain. When I asked who they were, she changed the subject, jumped to another thought, and then circled back without finishing anything. Her eyes never stopped moving. I told her I could call the police, trying to keep my voice calm, but she reacted instantly and violently. She yelled that calling them would get her killed, and that phones were how they tracked people. She grabbed my wrist and squeezed hard enough to hurt, begging me not to do it. At that point, fear hit me fully, because her grip was strong and desperate, and her face was twisted with panic that felt contagious. My heart was pounding, my hands were shaking, and I could feel sweat running down my back while I tried to pull away. Before anything broke, she stopped suddenly and stared at her arm like it was not hers. Her breathing changed, becoming short and fast, and she whispered that something was moving under her skin. She dug her nails in and screamed when blood appeared, shouting for me to get it out. Before the house turned into chaos, there was a moment when I realized I had lost control completely. She was no longer asking for help or explaining anything, and her movements became sharp and unpredictable, like she could snap in any direction. She ran into the kitchen and started ripping drawers open, throwing knives and utensils onto the floor without caring where they landed. I followed her at a distance, terrified of getting too close, trying to talk her down while my voice shook badly. She grabbed a glass, smashed it against the counter, and pressed the broken edge into her arm again while screaming that insects were digging deeper. Blood ran down her skin and onto the floor, and the sound of it hitting tile made my stomach turn. I stepped forward and tried to grab her arms, but she reacted instantly and slammed her elbow into my ribs. The pain was sharp and breath-stealing, and I fell back into a chair that collapsed under my weight. She started destroying anything she could reach, hitting walls, knocking over furniture, screaming that the house was infected and needed to be broken open. I could barely stand. My chest hurt, and panic made my thoughts slow and messy. Before I ran, I stood there too long, watching my house fall apart and realizing I was trapped inside it with her. My fear was no longer distant or controlled, and every movement she made felt like a direct threat. She turned toward me with glass still in her hand and walked closer, telling me I was part of it now. She said opening the door marked me and that they would not stop until I was torn apart too. Her voice was loud, shaking, and filled with something close to rage. I backed away toward the hallway while begging her to stop, but she lunged at me and swung the glass toward my face. I raised my arm and felt it slice open, warm blood running instantly down to my hand. I ran to the bathroom and locked the door just as she slammed into it. The impact shook the walls and the door bent inward with each hit. I pressed my body against it, crying and gasping for air while she screamed on the other side. I called the police while whispering and shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. She kept hitting the door and yelling that she could hear things moving inside me now, and every word made my fear worse. Before the noise stopped, I thought the door would give in and that she would get to me. My arms were burning from pushing, and my legs felt weak and close to failing. The banging suddenly stopped, leaving a silence that felt dangerous and wrong. I stayed frozen, waiting for the next hit, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. Then I heard glass shatter somewhere in the house. Cold air rushed in through the broken window, followed by fast footsteps moving away. I stayed locked inside until police voices filled the house and someone knocked, calling my name. They found the kitchen window smashed and blood smeared across the floor. But she was gone. A neighbor saw her run into the street and disappear between houses, barefoot and screaming. They wrapped my arm and asked questions, but there were no answers that helped. No name, no explanation, and no sign of where she went. The house never felt the same after that night, even after repairs were done and the glass was replaced. Silence no longer felt calm, but it always reminded me of waiting behind that bathroom door. I told my wife only part of what happened, because I could not say the rest out loud without shaking. She wanted me to come stay with them, but I stayed home because leaving felt worse. The police never called back with news, and no reports ever matched her description. It was like she vanished after breaking into my life for one night. I was just another man scrolling through Tinder at night, sitting alone in my apartment killing time because sleep never came easily anymore. My life was simple and predictable. I worked, came home, and filled the silence with my phone. Tinder wasn't hope or romance for me. It was distraction, something that made the hours pass faster when the walls felt too close. That's when I matched with Marla. Her profile stood out without trying too hard. Natural photos, no forced poses, and always the same small dog in her arms. She looked warm, relaxed, and confident in a way that felt real instead of staged. She messaged first, and the conversation flowed without effort. She laughed easily, asked real questions, and complimented me in a way that didn't feel fake. I kept waiting for the moment where it would turn awkward or cold, but it never did. By the end of the night, she suggested meeting in person. We agreed to meet up at a cafe close to her place. Nothing special, just a simple date. I agreed immediately, telling myself that sometimes things just work out. I arrived early to the cafe and spent several minutes pretending to check my phone while watching the door. When Marla walked in, there was no confusion or disappointment. She looked exactly like her photos, but more alive, more present, with a smile that felt directed only at me. She spoke with energy, leaned toward me while I talked, and paid attention in a way that made me feel seen. She touched my arm lightly once, just enough to make my chest tighten. I didn't understand why someone like her was sitting across from me, but I didn't question it. After one drink, she suggested leaving the cafe. She said her place was nearby and quieter. There was no hesitation in her voice, no playful pause. I nodded, trying to act calm while my heart beat too fast. Her apartment was clean and oddly empty, with no photos and no personal details. The music played softly while she poured drinks. We sat close on the couch, and when she kissed me, I didn't stop her. Before anything truly happened, I felt something slip. My focus faded, my reactions slowed, and my body stopped responding the way it should have. I tried to speak, but the words wouldn't form properly. The fear didn't hit immediately. At first, it was confusion mixed with embarrassment, like my body was failing me at the worst possible moment. My head felt heavy, my arms weak, and my vision blurred in and out as I struggled to stay upright. I tried to push myself off the couch, but my legs didn't cooperate. My mouth opened, yet the sound that came out was barely a whisper. Marla watched me with patience, her face calm, her posture relaxed, as if this was unfolding exactly as planned. When I woke up, my wrists and ankles were tied tightly to a bed frame. The cords cut into my skin when I moved, and the room around me was unfamiliar and windowless. Panic rose fast, filling my chest until breathing became difficult. I pulled against the restraints, my muscles shaking from effort and fear, while my thoughts raced without direction. I tried to scream again, but my throat felt raw and dry, producing only broken sounds. The door opened slowly, and Marla stepped inside. A man followed her, his head covered with a dark cloth. The door closed behind them with a final sound that made my stomach drop. Before they touched me, they waited. That waiting felt deliberate, like they wanted me fully awake and aware of what was coming. My breathing grew louder, uneven, and impossible to control as my eyes moved between them. The man approached first and grabbed my arm with firm pressure. He pressed a heavy object against my skin and increased the force slowly. Pain spread deep through my arm, sharp enough to force a scream out of me as my body jerked against the restraints. Marla watched closely, her eyes focused, her mouth relaxed. She didn't flinch when I begged or when my voice broke. She nodded once, and the man moved to my legs, repeating the same action until my muscles cramped violently. I cried openly, my face wet, my voice cracking as I asked why this was happening. I told them they had the wrong person, that I didn't know them, that I would do anything to make it stop. Marla laughed softly, not out of humor, but out of satisfaction. She stepped closer and looked directly into my face. You really don't remember? I swear I don't know you. You remember what you chose to forget. She spoke about the dog, the small white dog, the night I hit it with my car and drove away without stopping. The memory came back with brutal clarity, tightening my chest until it hurt to breathe. I didn't interrupt her. I couldn't. My body shook uncontrollably, not just from pain, but from understanding exactly why I was there. She explained how she found me using cameras, license plates, and weeks of watching my routine. She talked about patience, about planning, and about knowing that someone like me would eventually look for connection online. I knew you would swipe. You always do. The man returned to the bed and twisted my fingers one by one, slow enough to make each movement count. The pain forced screams out of me that I couldn't control, my body arching uselessly against the restraints. I begged again, apologizing repeatedly, promising anything I could think of. My words overlapped and tangled, sounding desperate and weak even to my own ears. Marla leaned close enough that I could feel her breathe. You didn't stop. You didn't look back. They left me there afterward, alone, shaking and exhausted, my body aching everywhere they had touched. When Marla returned, she cut the ropes without ceremony. She didn't apologize or threaten me. She simply told me to get dressed and leave. I failed trying to stand, my legs barely holding me upright. She watched without helping as I struggled toward the door. The hallway outside was empty, cold, and smelled old, like no one truly lived there. Days later, I realized the apartment wasn't hers. The building was abandoned. The Tinder profile disappeared. The phone number stopped working. There was nothing to trace. I thought about reporting everything, but every time I tried to speak, the image of that dog came back, lying broken on the street while I drove away. I deleted Tinder and stopped looking for company online. I avoid driving at night whenever possible, and sudden sounds still make my chest tighten. I don't think of Marla every day, but I never forget her. I don't believe she wanted to kill me. She wanted me to carry it with me, and I deserved it.
The first time I heard about the Equifax breach, I did what most people do. I checked the website they set up, entered my information, and received the message that yes, my data had been compromised along with 143 million other Americans. They offered free credit monitoring for a year, some vague apology about taking security seriously, and that was supposed to make everything okay. I signed up for the monitoring, changed a few passwords, and told myself it would be fine. People have their data stolen all the time, and nothing happens. That is what I believed until the calls started coming. It began small, the kind of thing you almost do not notice at first. A credit card I never applied for arrived in my mailbox. A collection notice appeared for a medical bill in a city I had never visited. My bank flagged suspicious activity on my checking account, small purchases at gas stations 3 states away happening while I sat in my living room in Portland. I called the fraud departments, disputed the charges, froze my credit, did everything the financial advisors tell you to do when someone steals your identity. But it kept happening, kept escalating, like whoever had my information was not just using it for quick cash, but was actively trying to become me. That is when a friend who works in cybersecurity told me about the dark web markets. He said if I really wanted to understand how bad the breach was, I should look for myself, see what information was actually out there. He walked me through the process, showed me how to download the Tor browser, explained how to navigate the hidden marketplaces where stolen data gets bought and sold like any other commodity. I told myself I was just curious, that I wanted to see what a credit card number or social security number sells for these days, never imagining I would actually find anything specific to me. But I found it, on a marketplace with a name I will not repeat, listed under the category called Fulls, which apparently means complete identity packages. I found myself. Not just my name and social security number, but everything. My date of birth, my mother's maiden name, my previous addresses going back 15 years, my driver's license number, my passport information, my medical records, my employment history, even scanned copies of old tax returns I had filed years ago. The listing included my email passwords, my bank account numbers, my credit card details, and a section labeled Associates that had my parents' information, my sister's information, my ex-girlfriend's information. Everyone connected to me packaged together like a family bundle deal. The price was listed as 0.08 Bitcoin, which at the time worked out to about $300. $300 for my entire life, for everything that made me legally and financially me, sitting on a website where anyone with cryptocurrency and bad intentions could buy it. I sat there staring at the screen, my hands trembling, reading through details so specific and accurate that I could not deny it was real. They had my childhood address, the one I lived at when I was 12. They had my first bank account information from when I was 16. They had medical records from a surgery I had undergone 5 years ago that I had almost forgotten about myself. What broke me was not just seeing the information, it was reading the reviews. The seller had a rating system like Amazon or eBay, and people who had bought identity packages from them left feedback. Good quality data, easy to use, 5 stars. Approved for 2 credit cards and a car loan, highly recommend. Fast delivery, information was accurate, will buy again. People were rating and reviewing the theft of human lives like they were reviewing kitchen appliances, and my listing had dozens of these comments, which meant dozens of people had already purchased my identity, had already used it for purposes I could not even imagine. The terror truly set in when I realized what those reviews meant. Dozens of transactions, Dozens of strangers now walking around with my social security number, my banking information, my entire legal existence copied and distributed like a pirated movie. Each one of those buyers could open accounts, take out loans, commit crimes, all under my name, and I would never know until the consequences came crashing down on me. I was no longer one person. I had become dozens, maybe hundreds, all living separate lives that would eventually converge into a nightmare I could not escape. I contacted the FBI immediately, filed reports with the Federal Trade Commission, called every credit bureau and bank and government agency I could think of. They all told me the same thing. Freeze your credit, monitor your accounts, file police reports, be vigilant. But none of them could tell me how to undo what had already been done. How to take back information that was now permanently circulating in criminal networks, being sold and resold, copied and redistributed, impossible to contain or erase. I was told to be patient, to document everything, to treat it like a long-term battle. What they did not tell me was that it was a battle I had already lost. The violations started appearing in waves, each one more disturbing than the last. Credit cards opened in my name at stores I had never been to. Loans taken out using my information for amounts that made my stomach turn. Tax returns filed, claiming refunds that went to addresses I did not recognize. Someone used my identity to rent an apartment in Nevada and then disappeared, leaving me with an eviction on my record. Someone else used it to get arrested for shoplifting in Arizona, which meant when police ran my name, it showed an outstanding warrant in a state I had never even visited. Every time I cleaned up one mess, two more appeared, and each new incident felt like a piece of my real self being chipped away, replaced by these phantom versions I could not control. The psychological toll became unbearable. I started having panic attacks whenever my phone rang, terrified it would be another collections agency or another police department asking me to explain crimes I did not commit. I stopped sleeping through the night, waking up every few hours to check my bank accounts, refresh my credit monitoring, search my name online to see what new disaster had appeared. My friends stopped inviting me places because all I could talk about was identity theft. My family grew tired of hearing about it. Everyone around me seemed to think it was a problem that would eventually resolve itself, that I was overreacting. But they were not the ones watching their lives be hijacked in real time. 6 months after I found the original listing, I made the mistake of checking the dark web marketplace again. Morbid curiosity pulled me back, and what I discovered made my blood run cold. My identity package had been updated. It now included recent information, things that had happened after the original breach. New bank statements from accounts I had opened, trying to rebuild my credit. New credit reports showing the damage from the fraudulent accounts. Even photographs that appeared to have been taken from my phone or my computer, images I had never posted online, private moments I thought were safe. Somehow, whoever was controlling my stolen identity had managed to maintain access, to keep harvesting new data, to keep the package fresh and valuable for potential buyers. That is when the full horror hit me. This was not a one-time theft. It was ongoing surveillance, continuous exploitation, a permanent breach that would never close. Someone, somewhere, had access to my devices, my accounts, my private life, and they were feeding that information back into the marketplace, ensuring my identity stayed profitable. Every password I changed, every security measure I implemented, somehow they stayed one step ahead, pulling new data, updating the listing, keeping me trapped in a cycle I could not break. I started seeing evidence of the other me everywhere. A background check for a job application showed addresses I had never lived at. A rental application was denied because someone with my name and social security number had destroyed their credit in another state. I received a jury duty summons for a county I had never been to. Medical bills arrived for procedures I never had. Each incident was a reminder that I was no longer in control of my own identity, that somewhere out there, possibly multiple somewheres, people were living as me, making decisions in my name, creating records and histories and consequences that would follow me for the rest of my life. The breaking point came when I tried to renew my driver's license. The DMV clerk looked at my file, frowned, and told me there was a problem. According to their system, I had already renewed my license 3 months ago at a different location, and the photo on file was not me. It was a stranger, someone with my name and birthday and social security number who had walked into a government building and successfully convinced them he was me. I stood there holding my old license, trying to prove to the clerk that I was the real version, and for the first time I realized that legally, officially, I might not be anymore. I changed my name eventually, went through the legal process, got new documents, started building a new identity from scratch. But even that does not feel entirely safe because the old identity is still out there, still being bought and sold on dark web marketplaces, still accumulating damage that might someday loop back to me. I cannot use social media anymore, cannot post photos or share personal details, cannot even tell people my real birthday without wondering if that information will end up in another listing being sold to another stranger. The Equifax breach was not just a data leak, it was the permanent fracturing of identity for millions of people who will spend the rest of their lives proving they are who they say they are. I bought my own identity on the dark web for $300, not because I wanted to commit fraud, but because I needed to see the scope of what had been stolen from me. What I learned was that some things, once taken, can never truly be returned. You can freeze accounts and file reports and change your name, but you cannot undo the fact that somewhere in the digital shadows there is another version of you. And that version, the one built from stolen data and criminal intent, might be more real to the world than you ever will be again.
The night I realized sleep was no longer safe, my son was 3 months old and the world outside was already falling apart. The pandemic had shut down everything and I was still pretending that working from home meant stability. I spent my days answering emails that led nowhere, trying to look calm while numbers on the screen kept dropping. My wife noticed, even when I stayed quiet, and the baby felt it too, because he cried more when I held him. Losing my job didn't happen with drama or shouting. It happened with a short call, a dry voice, and a promise that meant nothing. After that, every day felt smaller. Bills arrived faster than answers. I slept less and ate less and started snapping at things that didn't matter. My wife tried to keep the house steady, but fear was already settling in, even if we didn't name it. When her mother offered us the house in the countryside, it felt like a last option, not a choice. The place was far from the city, surrounded by trees, with no neighbors close enough to hear anything. My wife accepted, but later admitted she hated that house as a child. She told me she had seen things there that never left her mind. I brushed it off because fear felt like a luxury we couldn't afford. We packed, left the city, and told ourselves this was temporary. I believe I could control everything as long as I stayed awake and alert. That belief didn't last long. During the day, the house behaved. It looked old but harmless, with long corridors and thick doors that closed too softly. At night, the silence became uncomfortable, especially after the baby fell asleep and the house should have relaxed with us. Instead, it stayed tense, like it was waiting for something to start. Before anything strange happened, there was always a long stretch of quiet that made my stomach tighten. No wind outside, no animals, no distant sounds. My wife noticed it too, because she stopped turning off the bedside lamp. She said it helped her sleep, but she never slept deeply. The noises started slowly, scraping sounds inside the walls, like something dragging its weight from one side to the other. Furniture shifted without reason, never enough to crash or fall, just enough to be noticed. I checked every room, every corner, and found nothing. Each explanation I gave sounded weaker than the last. My wife began holding the baby tighter at night. She asked me if I had heard footsteps near the crib. I told her no, even when I had. I didn't want to feed her fear, but mine was already growing. Before the first paralysis, the tension built for hours. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, feeling my body sink while my mind stayed sharp and alert. Sleep came suddenly, like someone flipping a switch without warning. I woke up fully aware of the room, but unable to move a single muscle. My eyes opened, my breathing worked, but my body refused every command. Panic hit hard and fast because I understood immediately what was happening and couldn't stop it. I tried to call my wife, but my mouth wouldn't open properly. The pressure on my chest increased, not heavy, but firm, like something holding me in place. My heart raced and I could feel it in my ears. I noticed movement near the crib, slow and deliberate. My baby was awake, making soft sounds, unaware of anything wrong. The fear wasn't abstract anymore. It was focused, sharp, and aimed directly at him. After that night, I was scared of falling asleep. My wife noticed the dark circles under my eyes and the way my hands shook in the mornings. I didn't hide it anymore. I told her everything, and she believed me without hesitation, which somehow made it worse. The paralysis returned almost every night. Each time it lasted longer, and my fear grew faster. I stopped trying to fight it because resistance made my breathing harder. I lay there trapped, listening to my own heart while waiting for whatever came next. The worst night that changed everything, I watched a small figure appear beside the crib. It moved carefully like it understood balance and weight. It leaned over the crib, touching the mattress first, testing it, then bringing its face close to my baby's legs. I could hear it breathing slow and controlled while my chest tightened and my mouth stayed useless, unable to call for help. Before the worst moment, there was a long pause that made my thoughts spiral. I knew something else was there, even before I saw it. My body reacted with pure fear, but my paralysis didn't break. A second presence entered the room, taller and heavier. It moved slower, like it didn't need to rush. The smaller one didn't look back. It stayed focused on the crib, on my baby. The taller figure reached out, stopping inches from my son. I felt my chest tighten until breathing hurt. My fingers twitched, then my arm. Fear forced my body to respond, tearing me out of paralysis. I screamed and sat up at the same time. My wife grabbed the baby, crying and shaking. When I looked into the crib, one sock was gone. We searched everywhere. It never appeared again. The tension stayed even during the day. My wife insisted on calling people who understood these things. I didn't argue. I was tired of pretending logic could fix this. They walked the property and stood at a tall, thin tree with a narrow hole in the trunk. Their faces changed when they saw it. Before they began, the wind picked up hard and sudden, shaking the branches violently. They started praying, voices steady but tense. When they lit the tree, the fire spread unnaturally fast. As the trunk burned and fell, something inside screamed. The sound was sharp and desperate. The sound was sharp and desperate, like pain trying to escape wood. The screams stopped suddenly. The wind died. Everything went quiet. After that night, the house felt empty. The noises stopped. The paralysis never returned. My wife slept again. The baby grew without issues. We moved back to the city months later. Life went on, but I didn't forget. I became a writer of horror stories. And every week I write for you. But today, I'm telling you my story. Writing became the only way I could process what happened and help me to admit that fear doesn't always leave when the danger does. I returned to my old neighborhood because there was no one else left to take care of my mother, and because the doctor said she could no longer be trusted alone, even for a few hours. The house was exactly how I remembered it, with the same narrow hallway and the same creaking floor near the kitchen. And that familiarity made everything feel heavier instead of comforting. My mother looked at me like I was a guest who had overstayed his welcome, and every time I explained who I was, she nodded politely and then asked me again minutes later. I stayed patient, not because I was strong, but because leaving her alone was not an option anymore. The neighborhood hadn't changed. The same houses, the same fences, the same people who had watched me grow up. That should have felt safe, but it didn't. It felt frozen, like nothing had moved forward while I was gone. The house next door belonged to the Sandlers. They had been close friends with my mother for years, always visiting, always laughing. Now their house was dark, silent, and closed off. That silence pressed against me as soon as the sun went down. During the day, I tried to settle into a routine with my mother, cooking, cleaning, and reminding her to take her pills while she drifted in and out of awareness. She asked about Mr. Sandler more than once, and every time she did, her voice lowered, like she was afraid of being overheard. At night, before anything happened, I would sit awake in my room, listening carefully to the sounds of the street, trying to convince myself that nothing bad would happen if I stayed alert. I did not turn on music or television because I needed to hear everything. The first scream came suddenly and without warning, sharp enough to make my stomach tighten instantly. It was a woman's voice, loud and desperate, calling out my name again and again, her words breaking apart as she cried.
Michael, please stop! You're hurting me!
I stood up, heart racing, trying to understand what I was hearing. Arguments happened everywhere. I told myself the fear in her voice felt real, uncontrolled, and raw. That night, the scream stopped after several minutes, leaving behind a silence that felt just as wrong. The next night, I prepared myself in advance, sitting on the edge of my bed with my phone in my hand, telling myself that if it started again, I would call the police. I kept repeating that plan in my head, but my hands were already shaking before anything happened. Before the screaming began, there was a long stretch of silence from the Sandler's house, so complete that it felt like pressure building inside my ears. I focused on my breathing, counting slowly, trying not to panic. Then the yelling exploded through the walls, louder than before, filled with anger and hatred. Mr. Sandler's voice was deep and furious, spitting insults with no hesitation. You can't do anything right. You ruin everything you touch. Even God sees how useless you are. Miss Sandler begged him to stop, her voice cracking as she cried and pleaded for mercy, promising to do better, promising anything. I paced the room, torn between fear and guilt, feeling sick for not acting while listening to someone being destroyed verbally. Something heavy crashed to the floor, followed by the sound of furniture being thrown. My heart pounded so hard it hurt, and when he screamed that he would kill her, I snapped, running to the kitchen and grabbing the first knife I could find. Before entering the Sandler's house, I stood outside their window, frozen, listening to the shouting inside while my mind screamed at me to turn back. My body felt weak, my legs stiff, but the thought of doing nothing felt worse. The house was completely dark when I climbed inside, and the smell hit me immediately, thick and rotten, like old food left to decay for weeks. I stepped carefully, trying not to make noise, every muscle tense. Before I heard them again, the silence returned, stretching out until my breathing sounded too loud. Sweat ran down my back as I waited, knife shaking in my hand. From the bedroom down the hall, a man's voice spoke calmly, almost amused. You really shouldn't be here. This is none of your business. The lights flickered, then went out completely. Objects began falling around me, chairs tipping over, plates smashing against the floor, while the screams returned in full force, replaying the same argument word for word, as if the house itself was repeating it. I ran through the house, opening doors, searching desperately for Miss Sandler, my chest tight and my vision blurry with panic. Every room was empty, covered in overturned furniture and signs of chaos, but no people. The voices followed me, always just ahead, growing louder, more intense, until I reached the bedroom where the argument sounded strongest. When I opened the door, the room was empty, clean in a way that felt wrong. Miss Sandler screamed for help, her voice filled with terror and pain, while Mr. Sandler shouted cruel insults about her worth, her faith, and her failures. His voice rose as he described exactly how she deserved what was happening to her. Then came the final scream, sudden and short, followed by a heavy silence that made my ears ring. My hands went numb, and I dropped the knife without realizing it. All of the doors slammed shut at once, trapping me inside, while his voice roared through the house. Get out! You are not wanted here! A light bulb exploded above me, glass cutting my arm, and I ran blindly toward the exit, sobbing and gasping for air as I escaped into the night. I didn't sleep for days after that, barely eating, barely speaking, replaying every sound in my head. My mother noticed my fear but could not understand it, and that made it worse. When I finally asked a neighbor about the Sandlers, she looked at me with shock and pity. She told me how Mr. Sandler had stabbed his wife during a breakdown, screaming about demons and punishment before taking his own life. I listened to this terrifying story without knowing that the worst was yet to come. When I asked when this happened, my neighbor's answer left me speechless. In a few weeks, it will be 3 years since the day it happened. I will never leave my mother alone again, not even for a short walk, because I know what ignoring fear can do. The Sandler's house remains empty, but at night, I still hear faint sounds coming from inside, repeating the same argument over and over. Michael Taylor was a man who allegedly became extremely erratic after an alleged exorcism performed by clergymen who claimed to have expelled many entities, although a few evil forces remained within him. Shortly thereafter, Taylor brutally killed his wife, and at trial, his defense was that he was possessed by violence or inner evil. The court acquitted him on grounds of insanity, and he was committed to a psychiatric hospital. Travis came into my life when he was barely alive. He had no mother, no place to go, and no chance if I didn't take him. The sanctuary explained everything in legal terms, risks and responsibilities, but none of that felt real when I held him for the first time. He was warm, small, and silent, and he calmed down when I touched him. I took him everywhere with me. We went shopping together, we walked through town, we posed for photos like any other family would. I dressed him like a child. He sat next to me, ate at the table, and watched television with the remote in his hands like it belonged there. Travis learned to copy human behavior fast. Those habits made me forget what he was, and over time, I stopped seeing limits. When people asked questions, I answered proudly, saying he was raised with love and structure. Our life became known locally. We appeared in small advertisements and local promotions because people found us charming. Strangers recognized us, waved, asked for pictures, and told me how lucky I was. Every smile reinforced the idea that I was doing the right thing. I didn't think of Travis as something wild living in my house. I thought of him as my son growing up in a world that didn't understand him. That belief shaped every choice I made after that, including the ones that destroyed us both. Travis grew in ways I couldn't slow down or manage. His strength arrived quietly at first, hidden inside normal movements like when he hugged too tight or grabbed my wrist without knowing his own power. I corrected him gently, the same way I always had, and he listened, at least for a while. As months passed, his reactions stopped matching the situations. Small noises made him stiffen. Unexpected movements caught his attention too fast. He would stare without blinking, breathing heavy like he was deciding something I couldn't see. When that happened, I felt uneasy but kept pretending control was still mine. People warned me directly. Neighbors avoided me. Friends told me I was risking my life. I answered the same way every time, saying he trusted me, and that trust went both ways. I needed that to be true because everything depended on it. The incident with the neighbor's dog should have ended it. Travis lunged without warning, teeth exposed, arms strong enough to bend the fence. I dragged him back with effort and panic, my heart racing, my hands shaking. When he calmed down, I convinced myself that meant something. I ignored how close it came. But one night, everything changed. Travis went to bed early. I stayed awake, longer than usual. My body felt tired, but my thoughts wouldn't slow down, and I kept replaying the dog incident in my head without meaning to. Before anything happened, I hesitated in the kitchen, standing still with a glass in my hand. The house was quiet enough that every small movement sounded louder than it should. I remember thinking that I just wanted water and sleep, nothing else. The bottle fell because my hand slipped. It hit the floor hard, the sound sharp and sudden, and the noise cut through the house like an alarm. I froze, my chest tightening, already knowing this wasn't going to pass without consequence. From the hallway came fast movement. My heart started racing before I even turned around, and my body reacted faster than my thoughts could keep up. Travis came at me, upright, eyes wide, teeth visible, breathing loud and uneven. There was no pause, no confusion, and no recognition in his face. When he reached me, his hands locked onto my arms with a force that shocked me into panic. I tried to speak, to use the calm voice I had always used with him, but my words broke apart as fear took over. He pulled me down and the floor came up too fast for me to stop it. Before the pain took over completely, there was terror, raw and overwhelming, because I understood something had gone wrong beyond repair. This wasn't a misunderstanding, and this wasn't something I could talk my way out of. He wasn't reacting to fear anymore. He was acting on something deeper. His grip tightened around my arms, and the strength behind it was more than I could fight. I felt pressure against my face, then heat, then a sensation that made my body shake uncontrollably. My screams came out broken and useless as he kept going without slowing down. I felt my vision disappear all at once, not fading, not blurring, but cutting off completely. The darkness was immediate, and the shock of it made me gasp for air I couldn't seem to pull in fast enough. Panic flooded my body as I realized I couldn't see anything at all. I kept trying to reach him with my voice, repeating his name, begging him to stop, even as my mouth stopped responding the way it should. He didn't react to my words, and that silence was worse than any sound he could have made. I swung blindly with whatever my hand touched and felt metal connect with his head. The impact startled him just enough for his grip to loosen, and I crawled away on instinct, my body moving even as my mind struggled to understand what was happening. The floor was wet and slick beneath me, glass cutting into my skin as I dragged myself toward the counter. I reached for something solid, something sharp, knowing I needed it but not wanting to use it. Before I could pull away, he was on me again, faster than before, his weight pressing down as my breathing turned desperate and shallow. There was a moment where everything inside me resisted what I knew I had to do. Fear fought against attachment, and attachment almost won. Even as he hurt me, part of my mind kept insisting this was temporary, that I could still calm him if I tried harder. My hand closed around the knife by accident, my fingers slipping on the handle as my body shook uncontrollably. I didn't think beyond the immediate need to make him stop. I stabbed once, then again, each movement slow and weak, my arm barely responding. He screamed, a sound sharp enough to cut through my panic, but he didn't let go. The sound didn't slow him down, and that realization pushed me closer to breaking. I stabbed again, deeper this time, my grip tightening as fear took over completely. My body acted without permission, driven by survival rather than intention. Eventually, his weight shifted, then collapsed against me. I held him as he fell, my arms locking around his body despite everything. I didn't let go when he stopped moving. I stayed there crying, rocking slightly, my breath coming in uneven gasps as the reality set in. Killing him didn't feel like a victory or relief. It felt like losing the last thing holding my life together, even as it saved what was left of it. Help arrived eventually, but the damage was already done. I heard voices around me, felt hands pulling him away, and felt the cold air against injuries I couldn't see. I was aware without being present, trapped inside a body that no longer felt like mine. In the hospital, they told me what I had lost in careful words that didn't soften anything. My eyes were gone, most of my face was destroyed, and my hands were beyond saving. Each sentence landed heavy, one after another without room to process. Recovery wasn't something I controlled. Surgeries came and went, and pain became part of the background. Years later, a face transplant gave me something functional, but not familiar. I learned to live inside a body shaped by survival, not choice. I survived, damaged and altered, carrying the weight of what I did and why I did it. I don't think of Travis as a monster, and I don't pretend love was enough to save us. What happened wasn't a failure of care, but a refusal to accept limits that were always there. That's the truth, and it doesn't need anything added to it. Charla Nash was severely attacked in 2009 by a chimpanzee named Travis who had been kept as a pet by his owner, Sandra Harold. Nash went to the hospital to help return Travis after he escaped, but the animal suddenly became violent and attacked her for several minutes. The injuries were catastrophic, leaving Nash with extensive facial damage, loss of hands, and permanent blindness. Police eventually shot and killed the chimpanzee to stop the attack. I am telling this because keeping it inside is worse than saying it out loud. My name is not important, but my son's name was Eddie, and he was 10 years old when this happened. He was curious, stubborn, and always distracted by animals, especially dogs. That day, we went shopping after school to buy shoes and a jacket. Nothing special, just another routine afternoon. The shopping area was busy but normal, with people walking fast and cars stopping and starting near the sidewalks. Eddie stayed close to me at first, walking beside the cart, asking questions I barely answered because I was tired and focused on finishing quickly. I remember checking prices and thinking about dinner, not paying enough attention to anything else. Near the parking lot entrance, Eddie stopped walking. A stray dog was sitting near a trash bin, calm and quiet with dirty fur and soft eyes. The dog looked friendly, but what caught my attention was how he was watching Eddie. The dog stood up slowly and took 2 steps closer, close enough that I could see its eyes clearly. They were too focused, fixed on Eddie without blinking. The dog did not bark, did not move its head, and did not react to the noise around us. Eddie crouched and smiled, already asking if we could take it home. I told him no right away and pulled the cart forward. I said it was not safe and that we did not have time. He followed me slowly, turning around to look at the dog again, and I did not stop to make sure he was still right behind me. As we moved forward, I looked back once. The dog had not followed us, but it had turned its head and was still staring in our direction, completely still as if waiting. Inside the store, everything felt normal for a few minutes. I stood in line, paid for the shoes, and listened to the cashier talk about discounts I did not care about. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but I ignored it because I wanted to leave. When I turned around to tell Eddie we were done, he was not there. At first, I thought he had stepped a few feet away, maybe to look at toys or displays near the entrance. I called his name in a normal voice and waited. Nothing happened. I walked toward the door and looked outside, expecting to see him standing near the car or the sidewalk. He was nowhere. My breathing started to change as I walked faster, calling his name louder, checking every corner he could have reached. I asked employees if they had seen a boy in a blue hoodie. They all shook their heads. The noise around me grew louder, and my hands started shaking as I realized too much time had passed. At the edge of the park, I saw the narrow alley between 2 buildings. It led away from the street, dark, even during the afternoon. I did not want to go there, but my body moved before I could stop it. Before stepping into the alley, I stopped and listened, trying to hear anything familiar, but there were no voices and no footsteps coming from inside. My heart was beating so hard I could feel it in my throat, and my hands were wet with sweat as I took a step forward. A few meters in, I saw one of Eddie's sneakers lying on the ground. It was on its side, still tied, not thrown, not crushed. My stomach dropped and my legs felt weak as I picked it up. The shoe was warm, and that detail made my chest tighten because it meant he had been there moments before. From that moment, fear took control. My thoughts became loud and messy, and I could not slow them down. I started calling his name over and over, louder each time, my voice breaking as I moved deeper into the alley without thinking about danger. At the end of the alley, something was moving. At first, my mind tried to force the image into something familiar, and I recognized the same color of the dog, the same shape of the head, and the same bent ear. The dog stood up, taller than any person. Its body twisted and wrong with legs bent backwards and shoulders in a way no dog should. The creature turned toward me, and I saw the same eyes I had seen earlier, unchanged, fixed, and focused. Its mouth was wider now, its teeth wrong, chewing slowly with blood running down its chin. I froze because my body refused to move, and fear became heavy and sharp, pressing down on me until breathing felt like work. The thing turned toward me, chewing slowly, blood covering its mouth, not rushing, not hiding. Before it moved, my vision blurred, and my ears rang as panic took full control. I recognized the fur, the color, and the shape of the head, and that realization hit me harder than fear itself. This was the same dog my son had touched minutes earlier. The same one that had waited quietly near the trash bin. My body reacted late because part of my brain still tried to reject what my eyes were seeing. The creature suddenly rushed forward, faster than I expected, its movements heavy and certain, like it already knew I could not stop it. As it closed the distance, I saw its face clearly, stretched and wrong, but with the same fixed eyes that had stared at Eddie in the parking lot. I felt a sharp, tearing pain as its claws ripped into my forearm, pulling skin and flesh apart with force, and the impact sent me crashing hard against the wall. I fell to the ground screaming, pressing my back against the cold surface, watching it pass me instead of finishing the attack. As it moved away, it spat something onto the ground near my feet. It was a small plastic dinosaur, dirty and wet, one I recognized instantly, and that moment broke something inside me because there was no doubt left about what it had done. My body shook uncontrollably as blood soaked through my sleeve and my arm burned and throbbed with every heartbeat. I tried to stand and failed, my legs refusing to support my weight. I dragged myself forward using one arm, crying loudly, calling Eddie's name again and again, even though I already knew there would be no answer. The creature ran toward the street, dropping to all fours as it moved, its steps louder and heavy, moving exactly like the animal it had pretended to be before. I heard distant screams and sudden car horns as it disappeared, leaving me bleeding and broken in the alley, unable to follow and unable to look away from what it had left behind. Before the ambulance arrived, I sat on the curb, shaking violently, unable to stop crying or focus on the voices around me. My arm was wrapped in cloth, but blood kept seeping through, and every movement sent pain through my body. The police asked questions while the medics worked, speaking quickly and calmly as if this was normal. I tried to explain what I saw, struggling to find words, my voice weak and uneven. When I described the creature, their expressions changed, and they stopped writing. They searched the alley and found blood. Too much to explain, but they did not find Eddie. The word missing followed every report, every call, every update. No one said dead, but no one said alive either. Days turned into weeks filled with interviews, searches, and posters. I replayed every second in my head, blaming myself for looking away, for saying no to the dog without holding his hand, for not noticing sooner that he was gone. At night, my arm ached, and the scar pulled and burned for no reason. Sleep became short and shallow, filled with images I could not escape. Eddie was declared missing, not dead, and that word follows me everywhere I go. I moved away and changed everything I could, but nothing feels safe anymore. I avoid dogs. I can't look at their eyes. And I watch children closely, even when they are not mine. The first thing you need to understand is that nothing about me suggested I was the kind of man this would happen to, and that belief is exactly what made everything worse. I worked in an office, a regular job. I didn't think danger came from places like my desk, my apartment, or a casual conversation near the printer. Marla joined the company in early February, a few days before Valentine's Day. She wasn't loud, didn't dress to stand out, and didn't try to force herself into conversations. When she spoke, she did it softly, carefully, like she was always afraid of saying the wrong thing. That made people lower their voices around her, including me. She started talking to me after a few days, usually about work at first, then about small personal things like food she liked or shows she watched. I thought she was very pretty, and I knew she was single. Before asking her out, I told myself not to overthink it, not to assign meaning where there wasn't any, and not to expect anything more than a simple drink after work. Valentine's Day made it feel like a good excuse, and actually a romantic idea. When I invited her, she smiled in a way that looked relieved, and she agreed immediately. The bar was close to my apartment, quiet enough to talk without raising our voices. We stayed longer than planned, and the conversation never stalled, which made me relax more than I should have. She laughed easily, asked questions that felt personal without being invasive, and kept telling me how comfortable she felt around me. When the bar closed, I offered her the couch without much thought, mostly because it felt awkward to send her home late. She accepted quickly as if she had already expected the offer. That should have stood out to me, but at the time, it just felt like chemistry. In the morning, I woke up to the sound of movement in my kitchen, which immediately put me on edge because I live alone and I am not used to hearing anyone else in my space. Marla was already dressed, cooking breakfast, moving confidently through my apartment like she knew where everything was. I felt surprised and slightly uncomfortable, but I didn't say anything because I didn't want to seem ungrateful or rude. She left later that day, kissed my cheek casually, and said she would text me. I watched her walk away and told myself it had just been a good date, nothing more. That weekend I went out with friends like I used to, but I kept thinking about how fast everything had happened, even though I didn't fully admit it to myself. I tried to convince myself that I was just nervous because it had been a while since I dated anyone seriously. When I got home late that night and unlocked my door, I immediately knew something was wrong because the lights were on and the TV was playing, even though I was certain I had turned everything off before leaving. My body reacted before my mind did, and I froze in the doorway listening. Marla was sitting on my couch wearing comfortable clothes, watching television like it was the most natural thing in the world. When I asked how she got inside, my voice came out tighter than I expected, and she responded calmly saying she had made a copy of my key earlier, asking if that was okay like it was a small favor. I felt very confused and somewhat nervous. I told her that was too much, that we were moving too fast and that she should have asked me first. She nodded, apologized softly, and then asked what I wanted for dinner, completely ignoring the fact that I was visibly shaken. She stayed the entire weekend. Every time I tried to bring up the conversation again, she redirected it, smiled, or acted hurt enough to make me back off. I started feeling trapped inside my own apartment, sleeping lightly, locking my bedroom door at night, and listening for movement. By Monday, I was exhausted, anxious, and desperate for distance, believing that work would create a barrier she couldn't cross. That illusion shattered the moment I saw her at the office, standing confidently among coworkers, laughing and touching people's arms while telling stories. When I approached the group, the mood shifted immediately, and several coworkers congratulated me, mentioning how happy they were for us. My confusion turned into dread when Marla casually said we were a couple and that we were planning a future together. She spoke about marriage like it was a scheduled task, saying she was just waiting for me to propose and that she trusted I would do it soon. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears, and my hands started shaking in a way I couldn't control. I asked her to talk after work, barely holding myself together for the rest of the day. Outside, I finally said everything I had been holding back, explaining that we were not together, that I never agreed to any of this, and that she needed to return the key and to leave me alone. Her reaction was immediate and intense. Her face hardened, her breathing became shallow, and her voice dropped when she told me I was humiliating her. After that, she stopped speaking to me entirely, and the silence felt heavier rather than relieving. Weeks passed with no interaction, and I slowly began to relax, thinking the situation had resolved itself. But the worst was yet to come. It all started on one of our coworkers' birthdays. I attended, confident that Marla wouldn't be there. She had been very isolated in recent weeks and didn't even have a relationship with the birthday guy. We heard a scream echo through the room, sharp enough to silence everyone. Marla stood outside the bathroom, shaking, crying, barely able to speak, saying one of our coworkers had attacked her and that she defended herself. Inside, the man lay unconscious on the floor. The room filled with panic, shouting, and fear, and people immediately surrounded her, offering comfort and support. I felt guilt rise in my chest, thinking that maybe my rejection had pushed her into something traumatic. That thought ate at me, and I started checking on her, walking her home and staying close, believing I was helping someone fragile. Without asking, she moved back into my apartment. This time, she didn't even pretend it was temporary. She was cheerful, energetic, and disturbingly unaffected by what had happened. The man was hospitalized, unconscious, and she talked about it like it was already behind her. The disconnect terrified me. I slept less, avoided being alone with her when possible, and started feeling watched even when she wasn't in the room. One day, 2 police officers knocked on my door. They were asking for Marla by name. They explained everything carefully, telling me that the hospitalized man had woken up, spoken to them, and denied every accusation. The security footage confirmed his story, showing Marla following him, drugging his drink, and attacking him. As they spoke, Marla appeared behind me, calm and smiling as if this was just another inconvenience. When they arrested her, she didn't struggle. She looked at me and said, "Love required commitment, and commitment required action." I felt sick, dizzy, and ashamed, realizing how close I had come to being the next person she framed or harmed. Valentine's Day still arrives every year, but now it feels like a warning rather than a celebration. I learned that danger doesn't always come loudly or violently at first. Sometimes it comes quietly, smiling, and already holding a copy of your key.
I work as a psychologist and I specialize in sleep disorders. Insomnia, night terrors, anxiety-related episodes. I've listened to hundreds of people describe what happens to them at night, and most of the time the stories blur together. This one did not. This one stayed sharp even before I understood why. A patient told me he used to wake up unable to move, fully conscious, eyes open, body frozen. That part was familiar. Then he paused, swallowed hard, and said there was a man standing near his bed, watching him without blinking. He said the man's face was close enough that he could see every line of it, even though the room was dark. I asked him to describe the face. He hesitated longer than I expected, and when he finally spoke, his voice dropped. Oval face, small nose, thick eyebrows. He said the man leaned closer and moved his mouth next to his ear, whispering things he couldn't understand, but somehow knew were instructions. After that session, I started paying attention in a way I hadn't before. Sleep paralysis cases came in waves, but now the details were lining up too well. Different patients, different backgrounds, same structure, same presence, the same face. Before each patient reached the part where the face appeared, the tension in the room changed. They stopped shifting in their chairs, their breathing slowed, but their hands clenched harder. It was like their bodies remembered something their mouths were trying to avoid. One woman described feeling watched even after waking up, as if the episode didn't fully end when her body moved again. She said she avoided mirrors because she felt stupid standing there afraid of nothing. She laughed while saying it, but her eyes stayed fixed on the door. Then there was another patient, a woman in her early 30s, who reacted very differently. When she spoke about the man, her voice softened instead of tightening. She said she fell in love with him the first time she saw him in her dream, even though she admitted he was not attractive. She described him with the same details as the others, but her tone carried warmth instead of fear. She said that in her dreams he treated her kindly at first. He brought her flowers, jewelry, he took her to dinner, to the beach, to watch the sunset. She smiled while talking about it, and that smile made my stomach turn because it did not match the fear I had already seen in others. I did not sleep well after that. I kept replaying the sessions in my head, not as a professional analysis, but as a growing sense that something was pressing closer. Before the fear fully arrived, there was anticipation, and that anticipation felt physical, sitting heavy in my chest and throat. I decided to run a controlled exercise. I asked several patients to either draw the face or describe it in detail, telling them it could help externalize the fear. Most of them resisted. One man asked me if that would make it worse. I told him I didn't know, which was the first honest answer I'd given all week. The drawings were nearly identical. Same proportions, same expressionless mouth, same eyebrows. Even the spacing between the eyes matched in ways that should not happen by chance. I felt my hands start shaking as I laid them side by side on my desk. The first paralysis hit me a few nights after I reviewed the drawings alone in my office. I fell asleep on the couch without planning to, exhausted with my notes still open. I woke up fully aware of the room, the sounds outside, and the fact that my body was completely unresponsive. Before panic took over, there was a sharp moment of understanding. I knew exactly what was happening, and I knew that knowledge would not protect me. My chest felt heavy, as if someone was slowly leaning their weight onto me, waiting to see how much I could endure. He was already there when I realized I couldn't move, standing beside the couch, close enough that I could see his face clearly. Oval face, small nose, thick eyebrows. His eyes were fixed on me with focus, not curiosity, as if he was inspecting something that belonged to him. I recognized it immediately, which did not help. My heart raced, but my body refused to respond. He leaned toward my ear and whispered with irritation no longer vague or distant. He wanted me to stop listening, stop asking questions. The pressure on my chest increased when my breathing became uneven. After that night, the paralysis became frequent and unpredictable. It happened during short naps, during the night, and sometimes just before waking up. Each time he appeared faster with less hesitation, as if he no longer needed permission. His behavior grew more aggressive with every episode. He grabbed my arms, pressing them down hard enough that I could feel pain despite being unable to move. The pressure felt deliberate, controlled, meant to remind me how helpless I was. One of my patients stopped coming after a violent episode. Another begged me to stop asking questions. The romantic patient returned once more, terrified, and told me he had become cruel, punishing her for talking to me. The final episode came without warning. I woke up already trapped, my body frozen, my chest tight, my heart racing. He appeared immediately, closer than ever, his expression tense and hostile. He pressed his hand against my throat, not enough to stop my breathing, but enough to make his control clear. His voice was sharp and direct now. He told me to stop giving him attention, to stop allowing his face to exist outside the dreams. I did not fight him. I stopped reacting. I forced my thoughts into silence, refusing to respond to his presence or his demands. Slowly, the pressure eased and the paralysis released its hold. When I woke up, my throat burned and my body ached, but the room was empty. I shut everything down after that. I canceled appointments, destroyed the drawings, and deleted every recording. I understood that attention was not harmless, it was an invitation. Some former patients say the episode stopped when they stopped talking about him. Others say he is still there, quieter, waiting. I don't ask for details. I still experience sleep paralysis sometimes, but he doesn't appear anymore. I know better than to assume that means he's gone. Have you ever dreamed about this man? If you have seen his face, don't describe it. The more attention he receives, the closer he gets.
My YouTube channel was not about danger. I filmed abandoned places, strange beliefs, and small communities that claimed to have answers for people who felt lost. I never broke into places, never provoked anyone, and never stayed longer than needed. I talked to people, recorded what they allowed, and left. That routine made me feel safe, even when the topics were uncomfortable. A girl called April contacted me through a private message. She said she followed my channel for a long time and trusted the way I listened instead of mocking people. Her message was long and detailed, not emotional, not dramatic. She described a restaurant chain that worked as a front as a closed community. According to her, they promised food, housing, and purpose to people at their lowest point. She explained how the restaurant income went to a shared fund controlled by higher-ranked members. Workers never received payment, only food and a place to sleep. She said people were told money was meaningless because life did not end with death. She said some people left, but most never could. Children stopped appearing after a while. I answered because it sounded like an investigation that would attract attention. I did not feel brave or suspicious. I felt curious and confident, which was worse. April warned me once more before disappearing from the chat. She said the community never chased people. They waited. Before going, I searched for information. Small local articles mentioned labor exploitation, missing minors, and families that cut contact with relatives. Every case ended the same way. No evidence, no charges. The restaurant always reopened in another town after closing. The place looked peaceful. Inside, it felt like walking into a controlled dream. Fake trees, artificial light filtered to look natural, soft music, and people smiling without effort. Everyone spoke calmly and avoided the direct questions. Nobody carried a phone. Nobody asked for mine, which felt intentional. Before anything strange happened, I noticed how tired the staff looked behind their smiles. Their movements were slow but precise, like they were trained to save energy. A man named Ellis served me and talked openly about the community. He said they lived together on land outside of the city and shared everything equally. He leaned closer when the place emptied. He said there would be a gathering the next day, music, shared food, and something sacred. He said it was the moment when people understood what eternity meant. He told me it saved him when he wanted to disappear. I agreed to visit. I told myself I could leave whenever I wanted. That thought stayed with me until it stopped making sense. The land was deep in the woods, far from any main road. Families were already there when I arrived. Before the ritual began, there was a long period of waiting. People sat in silence. No one used that time to talk or relax. It felt like everyone was holding something inside, waiting for permission to release it. I stood near the edge, unsure if I was allowed to sit. The tension built slowly. The air was quiet, but not calm. People avoided looking directly at the trees surrounding the clearing. Wooden masks hid their faces. I stayed where I was because nobody told me to move, and moving felt dangerous. The story of Basa Haun was spoken aloud, not as a myth, but as truth. They said he was older than humans, older than gods, a keeper of land who demanded balance. He did not care about morality, only offerings. The chanting did not summon anything holy. When the chains were pulled from the wooden gate at the edge of the clearing, what came out was not a god answering prayers, but an animal released from confinement. The creature was real, too real. Massive, deformed, covered in filthy hair, matted with dried blood and mud. Its face showed no intelligence, no recognition of symbols or words, only hunger, panic, and aggression. Its eyes moved fast, unfocused, scanning for movement like a trapped predator. The people froze. This was not what they expected. A woman, the leader, shouted commands, raised her hands, screamed the name they had given the creature. It did not respond. The cryptid lunged without hesitation. It did not choose a sacrifice. It attacked the closest body. The scream was cut short. Blood sprayed across the ground. Then another body fell. The creature moved with brutal efficiency, biting, tearing, crushing. There was no ritual order, no preference. The clearing collapsed into chaos in seconds. I tried to run. Hands grabbed me from behind. The leader dragged me back. I was speechless when I saw her. It was her, April, my follower. At that moment, I knew I wasn't going to leave. Her grip shaking, her face twisted in terror and rage. She forced me to look at the carnage. Bodies were already unrecognizable. The chants had turned into screams and pleading. "This is your fault. It sensed you. You brought in balance. You don't believe enough." She shook me violently, screaming inches from my face as if accusing me could restore control. I tried to pull away, but I was weak, frozen, unable to understand how fast everything had fallen apart. April did not even have time to scream. The cryptid lunged forward and bit directly into her neck. Teeth tore through flesh and bone. The sound was wet and final. The body collapsed instantly, lifeless before it hit the ground. Blood soaked my clothes. The creature lifted its head slowly. Its eyes locked on me. I ran. Branches cut my face. Roots caught my feet. My lungs burned, my vision blurred, and still I ran. The sounds behind me grew closer, heavier, shaking the ground. I reached a small slope hidden by foliage and lost my footing. I fell hard, rolling down the hill, hitting rocks and dirt until my body stopped responding. Pain exploded through my shoulder and leg. The sounds stopped. When I finally crawled away, I did not look back. So police found the site 2 days later after reports of screaming and gunshots from nearby roads. They found no bodies, no survivors, no signs of where anyone went. Only blood. So much blood that the ground was permanently stained. Torn clothing, broken masks, shattered bowls. No remains large enough to identify. No tracks leading away. The case was closed as a mass disappearance. They never found the creature. That thing was not a god, not a demon, not intelligent enough to bargain. It was a wild cryptid, trapped and fed by humans who needed meaning more than truth. They didn't control it. They never did. The Basajaun is a legendary creature from Basque mythology, meaning Lord of the Forest. A hairy humanoid giant who lives in the woods and protects shepherds and their flocks, warning of storms with whistles and teaching humanity secrets such as agriculture and blacksmithing, representing ancestral wisdom and connection with nature, although he is sometimes also seen as a wild and fearsome being.
The first message he sent me through Instagram was a silly meme, and I answered it without thinking, which is how most bad things start. I was bored, scrolling late at night, half watching videos and half ignoring my phone, when his message popped up and made me laugh more out of surprise than humor. That small reaction was enough for him to keep talking to me. We didn't jump into anything deep at first. We talked about work, about how tiring everything felt, about how the internet was full of nonsense but also kind of comforting when you felt alone. He was polite, careful with his words, and never rushed me. That made me trust him faster than I should have. What he shared the most were memes, always the same style, always loud, repetitive, and absurd. A ballerina dancing with a cappuccino cup as a head. He called her Ballerina Cappuccina. I didn't understand the joke, and I told him that, but he said it was normal, that everyone was into it now, that it was just part of a trend. I believed him because I didn't know better. He never uploaded photos of himself, and I noticed it, but I ignored it. Plenty of people avoided showing their face online. I did too, sometimes. Nothing felt dangerous yet, just strange in a harmless way. After weeks of talking, he asked to meet in person. His name was Adrian. He suggested a cafe near my place during the afternoon, public and simple. I agreed because there was no obvious reason not to, and because part of me wanted to prove to myself that I wasn't paranoid. He arrived early and stood up when he saw me. He looked normal, even attractive, with tired eyes and nervous hands. He smiled too often, but he listened closely when I spoke, nodding as if every word mattered. That attention felt good, and it lowered my guard more than I want to admit. The conversation flowed easily, but there were moments where he drifted, staring at his coffee like he was thinking about something else entirely. When I asked him what he was thinking, he said nothing important, just life, just ideas. I didn't push. When he invited me to his apartment to watch a movie, I hesitated, but not long enough. It felt like the expected next step, and I didn't want to look childish or afraid. I told myself I could leave whenever I wanted. His apartment building was old and narrow. Inside, the place was small, dim, and messy, but not threatening. Clothes on chairs, papers everywhere, empty coffee cups stacked without care. The walls were covered with images, and my stomach tightened when I recognized the same character over and over again. Ballerina Cappuccina was everywhere. Before he did anything else, he offered me coffee. I told him we had just had some, but he insisted with a nervous smile, saying this one was special. I accepted a small cup just to avoid tension, already feeling uncomfortable, but not ready to admit it out loud. I asked about the images on the walls, trying to keep my tone light, but the moment the question left my mouth, his expression changed. His smile dropped, his shoulders stiffened, and he looked at me in a way that made my skin crawl, as if I had crossed a line without knowing it was there. He told me they weren't memes, that they were perfect creations made by something greater than us. His voice wasn't loud, but it was intense, controlled, and full of emotion. He asked me to sit down and promised that everything would make sense once I saw his videos. Before he turned on the TV, there was a heavy pause where he stood blocking the screen, breathing slowly like he was calming himself down. I felt trapped in that silence. The video started innocent enough, with the familiar dance and music, but his voice narrated over it, talking about devotion and transformation. Then the image began to break apart, the colors turning harsh and aggressive, the sound warping into something uncomfortable. Symbols flashed quickly and the screen filled with red. My heart started racing hard enough to make my chest hurt. I told him to turn it off, that I didn't like it, and that I wanted to leave. My voice cracked, and I hated that it did, because he noticed immediately. He told me I was being impatient, and he started yelling, not just angry, but hurt, asking how I dared to disrespect the woman of his life. His face was red, his eyes wide, his hands clenched so tight they trembled. He said I didn't understand anything, that I was ignorant, that I was ruining something sacred. Fear finally took control of my body. I ran for the door, pulling at the handle with shaking hands, but it didn't open. When I turned around, he was already there, his face twisted with rage and desperation. The blow came from the side. Something hard struck my head, and the room spun violently. I fell, my vision breaking apart, and the last thing I saw was him standing over me, breathing heavily, repeating her name under his breath. I woke up on a cold concrete floor with my wrists burning from the ropes cutting into my skin. The room was low and narrow, a basement filled with toys, empty coffee cups, and images of ballerina cappuccina covering every surface. The smell of old coffee and damp air made me gag. Before he came into view, I heard his footsteps approaching slowly, deliberately, as if he wanted me to hear him. When he crouched in front of me, his voice was calm again, almost gentle, which terrified me more than his shouting. He told me I shouldn't react like that I had provoked him by insulting her. He said he didn't want violence, that he just wanted help bringing her into the real world. His logic was broken, but his confidence was absolute. I told him my family would look for me, that people would notice I was gone, and he laughed openly. He said I was alone, that he knew it, that loneliness was why I was perfect for this. Hearing him say my own fear out loud crushed something inside me. He dressed me in ballet clothes while I struggled uselessly, then forced coffee into my mouth, cup after cup. I vomited, cried, begged him to stop, but he kept going until the caffeine burned through my body and everything went dark. I woke up tied tighter, my head pounding, my body shaking but awake because the caffeine wouldn't let me rest. He stood in front of me holding a large knife, talking nonstop about completion and devotion, his voice trembling with excitement. He cut my hair roughly, pulling and slicing without care, then forced a large cup over my head, scraping my skin. Stepping back to admire his work, saying I was almost perfect, almost ready. When he raised the knife again, panic exploded through me, but the caffeine kept my body responsive. When he leaned closer, I slammed the cup into his face with everything I had. He fell back, screaming, and the knife slid across the floor. I used my feet to drag it closer and cut the ropes with shaking hands. He grabbed my ankle, screaming that I belonged to him, that I would never escape. I kicked free, ripped the cup off my head, and hit him again before running. I don't remember how I got outside, only that I didn't stop running until my lungs burned and my legs gave out. The police came later, and they took him away, along with boxes of tapes, cups, and images. They told me I was lucky, but luck doesn't explain the nightmares or the way my body reacts to the smell of coffee now. I deleted everything, but the memes still appear sometimes. They are everywhere.
When Mr. Peterson first came to our island, he looked like salvation. He wore clean-pressed shirts and spoke Marshallese well enough to make us trust him, telling us about opportunities in America, about how we could give our babies better lives and receive money for our families back home. I was 19 and pregnant, living in a tiny house with my mother and 3 younger siblings, barely making enough to feed everyone. He said all the right things, promised that everything would be legal and safe, that I'd be helping a desperate couple while securing my family's future. I believed him because I wanted to, because the alternative was watching my family slowly starve while my belly grew bigger every day. The journey to Arizona was long and confusing. Mr. Peterson arranged everything, the flights, the paperwork, the temporary housing. He said I'd stay in a nice apartment with other women from the Marshall Islands, that doctors would take care of me until the baby came, and then I could go home with enough money to change my life. When we landed in Phoenix, the heat hit me like a wall, and everything looked so big and fast and foreign that I felt dizzy. A woman named Sarah picked me up from the airport, speaking broken Marshallese and smiling too much, telling me not to worry about anything, that Mr. Peterson had everything under control. The apartment was in a rundown complex on the edge of the city, and there were 5 other pregnant women already there, all from my islands, all with the same confused hope in their eyes. We shared 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom, and the walls were thin enough that I could hear everything. The crying at night, the whispered phone calls home, the sound of someone throwing up in the morning. Sarah brought us food and took us to doctor appointments, always watching us closely, always reminding us not to talk to anyone outside the apartment, that it could jeopardize our legal status. I didn't understand what that meant at first, thought maybe it was just American rules I didn't know about. The first time I realized something was wrong was when I asked to call my mother. Sarah said the phone lines to the Marshall Islands were down, that I'd have to wait. Days turned into weeks, and the excuse kept changing. It was too expensive, the system wasn't working, Mr. Peterson would arrange it soon. I started noticing other things, too. How we weren't allowed to leave the apartment alone. How Sarah collected our passports for safekeeping and never gave them back. How the lock on the front door clicked from the outside every time she left. One of the other women, Lanny, tried to walk to a store down the street, and Sarah found her within minutes, dragging her back and screaming about deportation and jail, about how ungrateful we all were, about everything Mr. Peterson had done for us. When my contractions started, Sarah drove me to a hospital, but stayed in the room the entire time, translating between me and the doctors, though I spoke enough English to know she wasn't saying what I was saying. After my daughter was born, they let me hold her for maybe an hour before Sarah took her away, telling me the adoptive parents were waiting, that this was what I'd agreed to. I tried to ask when I'd be going home, when I'd get the money Mr. Peterson promised, but Sarah just patted my hand and said soon. Everything would be sorted out soon. Back at the apartment, the money never came. Mr. Peterson stopped visiting, and Sarah became hostile, telling us we owed money for rent and food and medical bills, that we'd have to work it off before we could leave. She brought other pregnant women to replace those who'd given birth, and the apartment became more crowded, more desperate. Some women had been there for months, trapped in a cycle of promises and threats, too afraid to run because they didn't have passports or money or anywhere to go in a country they didn't understand. I finally escaped when a neighbor called the police after hearing one of us screaming. When the officers came, Sarah tried to say we were all legal residents, but they found our passports locked in a drawer and the paperwork that showed we'd overstayed our visas by months. They took us to a detention center at first, treating us like criminals, until someone from immigration realized what was really happening. Mr. Peterson was arrested weeks later, and the news called him a lawyer and a public official who'd betrayed his position. But to us, he was just another man who saw vulnerable women and decided we were merchandise. I never got my daughter back. The adoption was finalized before I understood I had rights, before I knew I could say no. Sometimes I wonder if she knows about me, if the parents who took her understand how she came to them, built on lies and desperation and women who had no choice. I'm back in the Marshall Islands now, but I left part of myself in that Arizona apartment, in that hospital room, in the moment I held my daughter and didn't know it would be the last time. Because Mr. Peterson didn't just steal babies, he stole our futures, our trust, our belief that someone offering help might actually mean it.
Carol and I wanted to go on a weekend getaway, somewhere quiet. We were driving on a rural highway late at night. I was tired, but I didn't say it out loud. Carol had been looking forward to this trip for months, and I didn't want to ruin it before it even started. The road was narrow with no lights, no houses, and no signs for miles. Just asphalt, fields, and darkness. The engine noise was steady, but every bump made me grip the wheel harder. Carol leaned back in her seat, scrolling through photos she had saved for the trip, talking about places we'd stop at. I answered when I had to, but my attention stayed on the road. We hadn't seen another car in a long time. That alone made me uneasy, even if I didn't fully admit it to myself. There's something about being completely alone on a road that makes every decision feel heavier. Stopping, speeding up, even changing lanes feels like it matters more than usual. And that's when the headlights caught a small figure on the side of the road. At first, I thought it was an animal. My foot eased off the gas without me thinking about it. As we got closer, the shape didn't move away. It stood upright, too still, right at the edge of the asphalt. Carol leaned forward, squinting through the windshield. It was a child. A boy, alone, barefoot, wearing clothes that didn't match the cold air. He didn't wave or step back. He just watched the car approach, his arms hanging straight down like he was waiting for something to happen. Before stopping, there was a long second where neither of us spoke. I felt my chest tighten and my hands started to sweat on the steering wheel. Every instinct told me this was a bad idea, but I ignored it because the alternative felt worse. I pulled over. The boy climbed into the back seat without hesitation. He didn't ask if it was okay. He didn't say thank you. He sat straight, his hands on his knees, his eyes fixed forward. When he spoke, his voice was flat and slow, like he was repeating words he had learned recently. He said his mom was coming. The silence after that felt wrong. Not quiet in a peaceful way, but heavy, like we were all holding our breath. I checked the mirror again and again. The boy's eyes never left me. He didn't blink. Not once. My skin started to crawl, and I felt my heart picking up speed. Carol tried to talk to him, asking him where he came from and where his mom was. His answers were short and off. He didn't explain anything. He didn't react the way kids usually do. No fear, no confusion, no emotion at all. Just words, spaced out, carefully placed. Before anything happened, there was a stretch of road that felt endless. The darkness ahead seemed thicker, even though nothing had changed. I realized I was holding my breath and forced myself to breathe again. My hands were shaking now, and I tightened my grip on the wheel to hide it. The boy finally said his mom was close. He said she was running. I asked how she could keep up with the car. He didn't answer. Carol turned to look at him, and that's when he smiled. His eyes blinked, one at a time. His breathing became shallow without me noticing. His shoulders were tight, almost locked in place, and my jaw hurt from watching him clench his. I kept adjusting my grip on the wheel because my palms were slick with sweat. Every few seconds I checked the mirrors again, even though nothing new appeared. Carol noticed my tension and asked if I was okay, but my voice came out stiff when I answered. I didn't feel okay, and my body reacted faster than my thoughts could keep up. My stomach dropped hard, and fear hit me all at once. Not panic, not screaming fear, but the kind that makes your body go cold. I looked back at the road, and my foot pressed down on the gas without me deciding to do it. In the headlights, something appeared behind us, low to the ground, fast, moving in a way that made no sense. It ran on all fours, but its body didn't move like an animal. Its head stayed level, locked on the car, while the rest of it stretched and contracted with each step. Before the impact, everything sharpened. The sound of the engine, Carol breathing fast, my own pulse pounding in my ears. I could feel how weak we were inside that car, how thin the doors suddenly felt. The thing opened its mouth as it ran. I saw teeth meant to tear, not chew. The boy in the back seat let out a short laugh, and his body started to change. His limbs bent wrong, his shape shifted, skin pulling tight over moving bone. I swerved, too late. As the creature closed the distance, my vision narrowed. I couldn't focus on anything except the shape behind us and the road directly ahead. My arms felt weak, like they might stop responding at any moment, and I had to force them to keep steering straight. My foot pressed harder on the gas, my leg trembling from the effort. Carol grabbed the handle above the door, her knuckles turning white, her breathing fast and uneven. The car left the road and crashed hard into the ditch. Metal screamed, glass shattered, and my head slammed forward. When I came back to myself, everything hurt, and the world felt tilted. Carol was screaming my name, and that sound snapped me into motion. Before I could reach her, weight slammed into the hood. The windshield cracked under the pressure, spreading lines across the glass. The creature's face pressed close, its features twisted, stretched into something almost human, but not enough to be mistaken. It ripped the passenger door open and grabbed Carol. She fought, kicking and clawing, her fear loud and real. I tried to move faster, but my leg wouldn't work right. I dragged myself across the seat, useless, watching every second pass. The creature pulled her out onto the road. I heard her head hit the asphalt. I screamed until my throat burned. Then headlights flooded everything, and a pickup truck hit the creature at full speed. Bone broke. The impact threw it into the trees. At the edge of the forest, the boy stood watching, his face twisted in panic before he ran into the dark. Pain shot through my leg when I tried to stand, sharp and immediate, making me gasp out loud. My hands slipped on the seat fabric as I dragged myself forward, every movement slow and clumsy. I could feel my heart slamming against my ribs, hard enough to hurt. My mouth was dry, my tongue heavy, and I couldn't form words fast enough to call Carol's name again as she was pulled farther away from me. People arrived quickly after that. Sirens, voices, hands pulling me away from the wreck. Carol was alive, barely, her body torn and bleeding. I couldn't stop shaking, even when they wrapped a blanket around me. They asked questions. I answered some of them, not all. The story became an animal attack. Everyone agreed on that because it was easier. The driver swore he hit a deer. No one argued. No one searched the forest for long. No body was found. No explanation was needed. I knew better, but I stayed quiet. Carol survived, but parts of that night are gone from her memory. Doctors say trauma does that. I don't correct them. It's better this way. I don't drive on rural highways anymore. I avoid empty roads. I avoid places where help is far away. I stay where people are, even if I don't talk to them. Hello, my name is Brian. This is a story of how a little adoption trip could have gone terribly wrong and almost end my life. You might think that my girlfriend and I wanted to adopt a child, but we don't. We really aren't interested in having children, at least for now. What we did go to adopt was a little puppy. The trip was long, and both my girlfriend and I thought, well, since we're going to California to adopt a puppy, why not stay a few days and take a vacation? Once we went to adopt the dog, we met the owner at the shelter. The girl seemed a little reclusive, but you could tell she was a good person. She not only gave us the dog and all the papers to make the adoption official, but she also recommended a hotel to spend a few days near the beach. The puppy was beautiful. He was a small black dog with 2 different colored eyes. He was still about 5 months old, but since his legs were quite long, we could tell he was going to be a big dog. I really didn't want to stress him too much traveling back and forth, so we just went to the hotel the girl recommended, and luckily we got a room and were able to settle in. The hotel was very nice. We were close to the beach and had all the amenities for a vacation. I really thought that with the dog we wouldn't be able to go anywhere, but it actually made things easier. The dog was already vaccinated and could go for a walk, so it wouldn't be a problem. What was going to be a problem were the neighbors. You see, we rented the hotel for 2 weeks, which was what we had left on our vacation. But on the second day of the hotel, we started to receive a lot of complaints from the management. These complaints said that our dog was too noisy, that he barked, and that he didn't let them sleep. Apart from being cruel and unfair, this was a lie, since the puppy hardly made any noise and barked only once or twice during the whole day. We tried to be out of the hotel as much of the time as possible. We rested the puppy to sleep when we got to the hotel, and mostly it worked. The dog was very calm and quiet, but the complaints not only kept coming, they got worse. They were getting more and more aggressive, and it got to the point that the hotel staff told us that if the complaints kept coming, we had to leave. At this point, we didn't know what to do. We really didn't want to go to another hotel, and the fact that they were kicking us out seemed really unfair. Whoever was complaining must really hate dogs. The night we were about to spend our first week there, we started to hear a lot of noises upstairs. Someone was moving a lot of furniture. It was 4 a.m. This really wasn't the time to remodel. Startled by the noises, the puppy started barking in fright. In response, the furniture stopped moving, but we heard something else. The person who was moving the furniture started banging on the floor, which reached our ceiling. At the same time, he also shouted something. "Shut that damn dog up before he gets you thrown out!" That was it. This was the person who was denouncing us. Furious, I went upstairs to have a chat. My girlfriend wanted to come with me, but someone had to keep an eye on the dog. Besides, she knew where I was going to be. Once I climbed the stairs, it wasn't hard to find the room where the complaints were coming from. The door was open, and inside, it was dark. I thought about leaving. Something about that place gave me a bad feeling. But suddenly, the lady who had threatened us before started screaming. They were not screams of rage, they were screams of pain. Something was happening to her. No matter how angry I was with her, I could not allow a woman to be hurt, whether it was a thief or her own husband. I went in determined to see what was happening. To my surprise, the door closed, and I was left in the dark. There was no more screaming, no more movement, no more complaining. Nothing. It was as if the room was empty. The light came on almost instantly, but something was wrong. The light was red. Upon inspecting the hotel room, it had no furniture, and there were satanic symbols drawn all over the room. In the center, there was a huge pentagram. Without time to process what was happening, I felt someone grab me from behind and hold a knife to my throat, making a sound as if to make me understand that I had to be quiet. From the leftovers, a woman in a ceremonial robe walked into the circle. Once she took off her robe, I recognized her. It was the woman from the shelter, the woman who gave us the puppy for adoption. The woman walked towards me with a somber, indifferent look on her face. She had a syringe in her hand, and without giving me time to speak, she quickly injected me. My body began to feel weak. I didn't lose consciousness. I didn't fall asleep or hallucinate, but my body became very weak, and I collapsed. The man began to drag me to the center of the circle, and once I was there, they took off all my clothes, leaving me in my underwear. The woman from the shelter approached me with a huge dagger that she pointed at the center of my chest. Suddenly, someone banged violently on the door to the room. It was my girlfriend for sure. I had to warn her not to come in. I had to tell her that she was in danger. Everyone waved to the other, and they turned the lights off. One man hid behind the door as he did with me. He opened it slowly. I tried to scream, to move, to make noise, but I couldn't. My body was totally paralyzed. When the door finished opening, my girlfriend was behind it with the dog in her hands, but she was not alone. The hotel manager and 2 policemen who were guarding the place were with her. The policeman pulled out his gun and quickly pointed it at the man behind the door. The lights came on and the other two people in the house raised their hands. I was safe. After I was rescued, I learned the whole truth. The neighbors' complaints were not real. This was all a trap by the girl at the shelter to get me to go into that apartment of my own free will. She recommended this hotel to me because that's where her boyfriend worked. Her boyfriend was the morning shift manager, the man who made up all the claims. My girlfriend found out that something was wrong with me because, without my knowledge, she followed me from afar to see that everything was in order and saw how someone who was hiding locked me in the room. When she went to tell the manager, he not only told her that he knew nothing about the complaints, he told her that the room had not been rented for over a month. This whole pet adoption thing was a front. A front to get young couples to be victims of their sacrifices and rituals they were trying to do in that apartment. I was not the first victim, as there were people before me who were not as lucky as I was. Luckily, the dog was still with us, but in our home. From that day on, I could never again go to a hotel without being scared, ignoring every sound we heard, and locking the doors immediately.
If you are a parent and you think you understand what your child watches on a phone, then you are already making the same mistake I did. I am telling this because I believed I was in control, when in reality I had no idea what was happening in front of my eyes. I am a single mother, and my son Mike is 6 years old. I work long hours, and when I come home, my body is tired and my mind is empty. The phone became an easy solution because it kept him quiet while I tried to survive the day. Mike spent hours watching short videos, jumping from one to another without stopping. He laughed loudly, sometimes suddenly, sometimes alone in his room, and I let it happen because laughter sounded like a good thing. The videos were strange and ugly, but they looked harmless. Animals with human bodies, loud sounds, fast movements, and faces that made no sense. I did not understand why kids liked them, but I assumed it was just another trend that would pass. Mike started repeating a name I had never heard before. Tung, 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 sahur. He said it with a smile, tapping the table while eating, like it was a joke that only he understood. When I asked him where it came from, he told me it was from the videos everyone at school watched. I asked him to show me, and he hesitated before handing me the phone. On the screen there was a thin figure, tall and stiff, like a stick with a face. The smile was wide and uncomfortable to look at, even knowing it was just a drawing. I told him it was fake, and that cartoons could not hurt anyone. That night, Mike told me he saw Tung 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 Sahur in his room. He said it stood near the door and watched him sleep. I told him it was a dream caused by too much screen time, and turned off the light. That night I understood how wrong I was. I reduced his phone use and took it away before bedtime. He cried and begged, but I stayed firm, believing that I was doing the right thing. From that moment on, Mike changed completely. He stopped laughing, stopped playing, and stopped wanting to be alone, even during the day. He followed me around the apartment and stayed close to walls and furniture. Before anything extreme happened, the fear showed itself in small ways. He checked doors before entering rooms and looked behind him constantly. He asked if the windows were closed, even during the afternoon. Every night he asked me to stay with him until he fell asleep. If I tried to leave, he grabbed my arm and begged me not to go. His hands were cold and shaking. He told me Tung 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 Sahur was closer now. He said it smiled at him and looked at him like it was choosing him. His voice trembled every time he spoke about it, and I could hear real fear instead of imagination. I took him to a psychologist hoping for answers. She talked about stress and overstimulation. Mike did not speak during the session. He just stared at the floor and pressed his fingers into his legs. That night, I woke up suddenly, fully alert, without knowing why. My heart was beating fast, and the apartment was completely silent. I reached for Mike and felt empty space. Panic hit me immediately. I stood up too fast and searched the apartment, calling his name quietly. I found him in the kitchen, crouched against the cabinets, shaking so hard he could barely breathe. He pointed toward the hallway and begged me not to go into his room. He said Tung 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 Sahur was inside. He said it told him to come out and follow it. I told him to stay where he was and walked down the hallway slowly, my legs weak and my chest tight. The bedroom door was half open, and the light was off. I turned on the light. There was a man inside my son's room. He was very tall and thin, bent over the drawers, searching through them calmly. His face was deformed, with a wide smile that did not move. In his hand, he held a long wooden stick. I screamed and froze. The man reacted immediately. His calm disappeared, replaced by sudden movement, and he rushed toward the door. He brushed past me, hitting my shoulder hard enough to make me stumble backward. I lost my balance and grabbed the doorframe to avoid falling. My whole body was shaking, and my chest hurt from breathing too fast. The man reached the hallway, then stopped. Slowly, he turned his head toward the kitchen. His smile returned, wider than before, and his eyes fixed on my son. He did not seem scared anymore. He seemed pleased.
I'll come back. We're going to be together forever.
He smiled at Mike while saying it. Then he ran out of the apartment. The moment he left the apartment, my body finally reacted. I ran to Mike, grabbed him, and locked ourselves in the bathroom. He was crying so hard he could not breathe properly. I checked every room while holding him, terrified the man was still inside. Every open space felt dangerous. Every shadow felt like a place he could hide. When I was sure the apartment was empty, I locked the front door and pushed furniture against it. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. I sat on the floor with Mike in my arms and tried to calm him while dialing the police. My voice broke when I explained what happened, and I could barely answer their questions. The conflict ended there. The man was gone. But the damage was already done. The police arrived and searched the apartment. They took notes, asked questions, and looked at the windows and doors. They said it was a break-in and promised to investigate. Mike did not let go of me the entire time. He kept his face pressed against my chest and refused to look at anyone. After they left, I locked every door again and checked them repeatedly. I kept the lights on and sat awake until morning. I knew sleep would not come back easily. In the days that followed, I boarded up every window with wooden planks. I did it slowly, carefully, because I could not afford to move and had nowhere else to go. I did not want anyone to see inside. I did not want anyone watching my son while he slept. Mike does not use a phone anymore. He does not talk about memes or videos. He asks if the house is closed and if I am near him. I am still here, watching, because some dangers do not come from imagination. They come from not paying attention soon enough.
I matched with Marcus on Tinder 2 years ago. He openly mentioned furry roleplay, boundaries, and experience, and he did it without sarcasm or embarrassment, which is rare enough to stand out immediately. We started talking that same night, and the conversation moved fast in a way that felt natural instead of forced. We talked about costumes, about how trust mattered more than fantasy, and about how these kinds of roleplays only worked when both people respected limits. He used calm language, asked questions, and never rushed anything, which made me feel like I was dealing with someone who understood responsibility. When we talked about meeting in person, I suggested my place first out, but he declined politely and explained that his apartment was already prepared for role play and that he felt more comfortable there. I agreed without pushing back. I prepared my costume and walked out telling myself that nothing bad was supposed to happen if rules existed. Marcus opened the door with a relaxed smile and stepped aside to let me in. We sat on the couch and talked for a while before anything else happened, and he offered me water while asking again if I was still comfortable with everything we had discussed online. He asked me to repeat the safe word, listened carefully, and nodded like it mattered, which lowered my guard even more. I went to the bathroom to change, and when I came back wearing the costume, Marcus looked at me differently then, more focused. And when he handed me the collar and attached the leash, everything still felt controlled and agreed upon. Before the tone shifted, there was a long pause where Marcus didn't speak, and I stood there waiting for instructions while my breathing echoed inside the costume. That silence stretched too long, and it made me tense in a way I hadn't planned for, because it felt like something was being decided without me being included. He finally told me to walk around the room slowly while holding the leash tight, correcting me with sharp pulls whenever he didn't like my posture or speed. I followed his instructions because that was the agreement, but the movements were rougher than expected, and my neck started to hurt from the constant pressure. There was another pause before the next command, and during that time I could hear him moving behind me, close enough that I could feel it, even without seeing him. When he told me to get down on the floor, I obeyed, but my heart started racing in a way that felt wrong instead of exciting. He circled me while I stayed still, then told me to roll onto my back and remain there without moving. His foot pressed against my side, not enough to hurt yet, but enough to let me know how easily it could. When he pushed me suddenly, the impact knocked the air out of my lungs, and the sound I made wasn't part of any roleplay. I said the safe word clearly and without panic, expecting him to stop immediately like we had agreed. He didn't react, didn't acknowledge it, and instead tightened the leash while telling me to stay quiet and behave, which was the moment I realized something had already gone wrong. He placed a bowl on the floor and told me to eat from it, and when I smelled what was inside, my stomach twisted immediately. I shook my head and said no, repeating the safe word louder this time because fear was starting to take over and I needed him to hear me. The slap came without warning, sharp enough to make my ears ring, and before I could react, he grabbed me and forced me down to the floor. He told me that disobedience wasn't part of the game and that I needed to learn consequences if I wanted rewards. He tied my wrists behind my back with something rough that cut into my skin, then dragged me down the hallway and shoved me into a small room with no windows. There was a mattress on the floor and nothing else, and when he closed the door and locked it, the sound echoed inside my head. Before leaving, he told me that if I behaved properly, I would be rewarded and released, but if I kept resisting, things would get worse. His voice was calm when he said it, and that calmness scared me more than yelling would have. Time stopped working normally in that room, and every time I heard keys outside the door, my body reacted before my thoughts could catch up. My muscles were tensed, my breathing sped up, and I tried to prepare myself for whatever was coming next. Marcus came back several times, each time bringing something different, and he never rushed, which made everything feel longer and more deliberate. He chose when to hurt me and when to stop, and that control made it clear that my reactions didn't matter to him at all. He hit me in ways that caused pain without knocking me unconscious, and while he did it, he spoke to me like I wasn't human, telling me what I was and what I deserved. I screamed the safe word until my voice cracked, but he never responded to it, never even acknowledged that it existed. He forced me to stay in the costume the entire time, telling me that taking it off wasn't allowed and that I wasn't a person while wearing it. When I resisted or cried, the punishment got worse, and I learned quickly that nothing I did would make him stop. By the time morning came, my body felt heavy and unresponsive, and when he finally untied me, there was no kindness in the movement. He told me to crawl, said I had earned what came next, and I was too exhausted to understand what that meant. Before taking me outside, Marcus was quiet in a way that felt final, and when he grabbed the leash again, my stomach dropped because I had no idea where he was taking me. He pushed me into his car and I curled up on the seat because sitting normally felt impossible. I tried to focus on anything that could help me remember where we were going, but fear made everything blur together. Streetlights passed by and the silence inside the car made every second feel heavier. When the car stopped, he pulled me out roughly and threw me onto the ground in an open area that smelled like dirt and grass. My hands scraped against the ground, and the pain barely registered compared to everything else. He unclipped the leash, threw it at me, and spat near my face before calling me disgusting and worthless. Then he got back into the car and drove away, leaving me there without looking back even once. I stayed there until the sun came up because my legs wouldn't support me, and when I finally managed to move, every step felt unstable and unreal. Someone eventually found me and called for help, but by then, the damage was already done. Doctors treated my injuries, and people asked questions that I couldn't answer without shaking because explaining it made everything feel fresh again. Therapists tried to give names to what happened, but none of those names changed the memories. I don't use dating apps anymore. I lost all my trust on people. The costume is still sealed in a bag that I haven't opened since that night.
My name is Ethan Rowe. I've worked in wildlife preservation for over a decade. Forests, reserves, rural towns that sit too close to places they don't really control. I've dealt with injured animals, sick predators, and people who panic fast when something dies near their fence. Great Pines was just another assignment. A small town surrounded by dense forest. Reports came in about animals found dead near the tree line. Deer, livestock, pets, bodies damaged in ways that didn't match common predators. No feeding patterns, no clear cause. Locals started talking about something unnatural. That part didn't concern me. Fear spreads faster than facts. My job was to find a rational explanation and shut the noise down. I was sent with a small team to locate what we assumed was an injured animal acting out of stress. There were 4 of us. Mark Holden handled tracking and movement patterns. Lewis Grant covered animal health and sedation. Noah Pike handled perimeter and safety. I coordinated reports and terrain. We'd worked together enough to trust each other without speeches. We entered the forest early afternoon. Weather stable, visibility clear, no reason to rush. Our plan was simple: find tracks, identify the animal, sedate if necessary, and relocate or put it down if it was too far gone. The forest didn't fight us. No strange sounds, no signs of disturbance. That bothered Mark more than me. Predators leave evidence even when they try not to. We followed an area where several animals had been found dead. Still nothing. No fur, no blood trails, no broken branches. It felt like whatever had happened hadn't required effort. As the light started dropping, we discussed pulling back. Night work raises risk. That's basic. We turned toward the exit path. That's when Noah stopped and pointed toward the trees. Before we moved closer, there was a stretch of quiet that forced attention. Not silence, but a lack of the usual background noise. No distant movement, no wind in the leaves. It felt like the forest was holding space. Something crossed between the trees ahead. Low shape, heavy body. It moved slowly and unevenly. Mark dropped to one knee to get a better look. It came into view again, this time clearer. Large, muscular, 4-legged. The outline matched a big cat, larger than anything local. One rear leg dragged behind it. That detail made everything click. An injured predator, displaced, confused, dangerous only because it didn't know where it was. We prepared the tranquilizers, no one raised their voice, movement stayed controlled. The animal didn't react to our presence the way predators usually do. It didn't run, it didn't posture, it just kept moving deeper. Before we followed, there was a moment where it stopped, completely still, head lowered, body tense. I remember thinking it was about to collapse. Instead, it started rising. Slowly, deliberately, its front legs pulled inward. The spine stretched upward in a way that didn't match any anatomy I knew. The dragging leg straightened as it lifted. Mark whispered that something was wrong, but his voice didn't carry confidence. It carried confusion. By the time it stood fully upright, none of us thought it was an animal anymore. Before anything else happened, there was a pause where no one moved because no one knew how. The shape in front of us no longer had a recognizable form. It wasn't standing like a person or an animal. It was balanced in a way that didn't make sense. The outline sharpened, then stretched again. What had looked like muscle now looked flat. Depth disappeared. Our lights passed over it without change. More shapes appeared around it, not stepping out, just existing where there had been empty space a second earlier. Mark raised his rifle but didn't fire. Lewis started back up slowly. Noah cursed under his breath. The shapes moved. They didn't charge, they didn't surround us in a clean pattern. They crossed paths between trees, moving fast enough to cut off space without touching it. The sound they made was thin and sharp, like friction without weight. One crossed directly through Mark. He screamed as his jacket split open across the chest and arms. Lines appeared on his skin after the contact, deep and raw. He fell forward, legs folding under him at angles that stopped being human. Lewis rushed to him and another shape passed through his side. His body jerked and he hit the ground hard, his arm bending wrong beneath him. Noah tried to drag Lewis back. A shape crossed his torso and he collapsed, gasping, his leg snapping when it struck a tree. I was on the ground before I realized my knee had given out. Before I crawled away, I understood that staying still meant being taken apart. There was no attack rhythm, no focus, just movement that punished contact. Hands brushed my back. Burning followed immediately. My skin split into lines I couldn't see but felt open wide. I screamed and pushed myself forward using dirt and roots to move. The shapes stayed close. They didn't chase, they didn't rush, they stayed just within reach. I reached the clearing and saw the truck. My vision narrowed, I stumbled, I slammed into the door and dragged myself inside. I locked it and started the engine with shaking hands. Before I could drive, I heard Noah's voice behind me. "Ethan, wait, I can still move. Please don't leave." His voice sounded close, running. I looked toward the mirrors and saw nothing but trees. My chest tightened. My foot hovered over the pedal. I remembered his leg breaking. I remembered him screaming when he tried to stand. This wasn't Noah, and these things already proved that they were capable of logical thinking. They knew how to lure their victims. The voice came again, louder, closer. "Ethan, I'm right here!" I hit the gas and didn't look back. I drove until the road stopped making sense. When I reached the station, I couldn't stop shaking long enough to speak clearly. I told them everything. They went back in daylight. They found all 3 bodies exactly where I said. Broken, marked, no signs of an animal, no explanation. They didn't accuse me directly. They didn't need to. Nothing I said fit their reports. I was placed under observation, then transferred. They wanted to accuse me, but the locals backed up my story, and the wounds of my partners and scratch in my back didn't fit to any human attack. They said trauma distorted perception, that I replaced an animal with something else because my mind needed meaning. I didn't argue. This is where I am now. Medication keeps things quiet. When I take it, the shapes stop appearing in corners and doorways. That's how I know they aren't real. I want to get better. I follow every rule they give me. I write when they ask. I sleep when the lights go out. But sometimes when the building is quiet, I hear movement outside my room. Fast, controlled, familiar. I keep my eyes closed and wait for morning. The good part is that I know those shadows are not real. Whatever attacked us that night is still in the forest. The bad part is that I don't think I will get any better. I'm afraid that this mental institution is now my new, permanent home. Shadow Men cryptids are recurring entities reported across cultures and decades, always described with the same unsettling consistency. They appear as tall human-shaped silhouettes with no facial features, absorbing light instead of reflecting it, often seen watching from doorways, corners, or the edge of vision. Witnesses report intense fear, paralysis, and the sensation of being observed with intent, even though these entities show no clear signs of communication or emotion. Unlike ghosts or demons, shadow men do not announce themselves or interact directly. They simply observe, reinforcing the idea that they are not manifestations of imagination, but something that exists alongside human perception, surfacing only when awareness is fractured. Standing there with a calm smile that did not move when she noticed my reaction. It took me several seconds to recognize her, because my brain resisted the idea before accepting it. Her name was Lena, and we had not seen each other since we were teenagers, back when promises were easy and consequences felt unreal. We started talking in an awkward way, filling the silence with safe questions that avoided anything important, and I noticed quickly that she answered too fast, like she had rehearsed every possible version of this conversation. I also noticed that she watched me closely while answering, like she was checking if I matched an image she had kept for years. She told me she knew I lived nearby and that she had seen me walking my dog before, which made me uncomfortable even though I tried not to show it. When I asked how long she had been back in town, she said she returned recently and waited for the right moment to see me, and the way she said it made my chest tighten even though her tone stayed soft. I knew I would run into you eventually. You live close. It was only a matter of time. I tried to laugh it off, but she watched my face closely, like she was checking my reaction. When we said goodbye, she called my name again, and when I turned, her expression changed slightly. I didn't forget the promise. I'm back. I smiled out of reflex, nodded, and walked away faster than usual, already trying to convince myself that it meant nothing. Valentine's Day arrived a few days later, and I tried not to think about Lena even though the memory of her words kept coming back when I was alone. That morning, a knock on my door interrupted my routine, and before opening it, I stood still, listening, feeling my heart beat harder than it should. When I opened the door, she was there, standing straight and calm, looking at me like she belonged in that space. I asked how she found my address, and she avoided the question without changing her expression. She reminded me of something we said when we were 15, about a silly promise when we were teens. We promised each other that if we weren't married to other people by the time we turned 30, we would marry each other. And here I am. I waited 15 years for this moment. Hearing it out loud made my skin crawl because it sounded serious in her mouth. I told her it was a childish joke and explained that I had a girlfriend, trying to keep my voice steady. Her reaction was immediate and overwhelming, as she started crying loudly and accused me of betraying her, stepping closer until I had to block her with my arms. I warned her to leave and said I would call the police if she did not calm down. "You lied to me! You chose someone else!" She stopped crying suddenly, wiped her face, and told me I was making a mistake, adding that we would be together forever, either alone or with no one else. Then she walked away, leaving me shaking in my doorway. "You will regret this." I almost canceled my Valentine's dinner that night, but I convinced myself that fear was not a reason to change plans, even though my hands were shaking while I grabbed my keys. I texted my girlfriend Rachel to tell her I was on my way, and she replied that I should meet her at the restaurant instead to keep the surprise. At the restaurant, time passed too slowly, and every minute without a response made my thoughts darker and harder to control. I called her phone again and again, listening to it ring until my throat felt tight. When someone sat across from me, I looked up ready to complain, but the face in front of me froze me in place. She had Rachel's hair, Rachel's clothes, and Rachel's posture, but her eyes were wrong, focused, and excited. "You look tense. Valentine's Day does that to people." Lena smiled and leaned closer, and my body reacted before my mind as fear ran through me and made it hard to breathe. My hands trembled as I told her to stop and demanded to know where Rachel was, but she laughed openly, enjoying the attention and the confusion around us. People stared while she acted calm and affectionate, touching my hand and calling me by my girlfriend's name. Security approached when I raised my voice and I tried to explain that she was pretending, that something was wrong, but Lena started crying again, playing the role perfectly. We were asked to leave, and outside she followed me, still talking about destiny and promises. "You should not have rejected me. This could have been easy. We are meant to be together, but I fixed the problem." Those last words made me feel desperate. I ran to my car and drove to Rachel's apartment as fast as traffic allowed, calling her nonstop while my fear turned into panic. When I reached her place, the door was unlocked. Inside the bedroom, I found her on the floor, tied, shaved, and lifeless, and my legs almost gave out as I realized she was gone. The walls were decorated with her hair placed carefully, like trophies. I heard footsteps behind me and turned to see Lena standing in the doorway, holding a bag and smiling with satisfaction. She told me she removed the obstacle and that now we could finally be together. When she reached for me, I stepped back and tripped, and when she grabbed my arm, I reacted without thinking, kicking her knee and pushing her away. She fell hard and hit her head, screaming my name. I ran out of the apartment and drove straight to the police station, barely able to speak, barely able to breathe, but desperate to get away from her. Lena was arrested that night, and they later confirmed that she had planned everything for years, watching, waiting, and preparing. Rachel was buried a week later, and I still visit her grave, even though it hurts every time. I was 17, and that night was supposed to be quiet and simple. My mom left for her night shift at the hospital just after 9, wearing the same tired expression she always had before work. She reminded me to lock the door, text her if I needed anything, and try to sleep at a decent hour. I nodded and watched her car disappear down the street. My brother wasn't home either. He had gone to spend the weekend with his girlfriend, which meant I had the entire place to myself. I had been looking forward to that. I liked the idea of being alone without anyone watching what I did. I locked the front door and checked the windows, and I turned on the TV, grabbed snacks, and decided it would be a movie night. But I kept the kitchen light on because I didn't like seeing it completely dark when I walked past it. Eventually, I went to my bedroom with my laptop and phone. I closed the door and locked it without thinking too much about it. I sat on my bed chatting with friends, laughing quietly so the neighbors wouldn't hear. Around midnight, my friends started logging off one by one. I stayed awake, scrolling through videos and rewatching scenes from a movie I barely paid attention to. My phone battery was low, and I told myself I would sleep soon, but I didn't rush it. Before anything happened, there was a moment where my focus drifted away from the screen. I didn't hear a sound, but my body went still anyway. I stared at my bedroom door without knowing why, watching the thin line of light from the kitchen under it. That light changed. Slowly, something blocked it. A shadow passed from one side of the door to the other, steady and deliberate. I sat up straight, my heart speeding up instantly. My phone slipped from my hand and landed on the bed. The shadow stopped. Whoever it was stood directly outside my door. I stayed frozen, barely breathing, listening for footsteps or movement, but there was nothing. Then my mom's voice came from the hallway right behind the door. She told me to open up and say hello. Her voice sounded calm, relaxed, like she had just come home from the grocery store instead of work. My body reacted before my mind did. My hands started shaking so badly I had to press them into the mattress to steady them. My mom was not supposed to be home, and she never came back once her shift started. She always texted first. Always. "Open the door, darling. Are you okay? You're not answering me." The tone didn't change. She just repeated the same request, like she was waiting patiently for me to obey. I grabbed my phone and unlocked it, my thumb hovering over the emergency call screen. My chest felt tight, and I had to force myself to breathe slowly. I stayed silent, hoping she would move away, hoping I would hear footsteps heading down the hallway. Instead, she knocked. Once, then again. Each knock was spaced out and controlled, not angry and not worried. That scared me more than yelling would have. My mom never knocked like that. Before the next thing happened, there was silence. Total silence. No knocking, no breathing, no movement. I waited, counting seconds in my head, hoping to hear her walk away. I leaned forward and whispered her name, barely making a sound. There was no response. I whispered it again, louder this time, my voice shaking. Her voice came back suddenly, louder and sharper. She asked what was wrong with me and why I was acting weird. The calm tone was gone, replaced by irritation that felt forced and unnatural. Then she started screaming. She shouted my name over and over, slamming her hand against the door hard enough to rattle the frame. The sound made me flinch and curl in on myself, covering my ears as tears filled my eyes. Just as suddenly, it stopped. The screaming cut off, leaving the house completely silent again. I sat there shaking, my thoughts racing and crashing into each other. Every instinct told me not to open the door, but another part of me needed to see what was there. I needed proof that this was real. Before I could change my mind, I unlocked the door and pulled it open. The hallway was completely dark. The kitchen light was gone, and the darkness felt heavy and wrong, filling the space in a way that didn't make sense. My eyes couldn't adjust, and it felt like the darkness was pressing toward me. Before I could step back, the darkness moved faster. It flooded the hallway and poured into my room, swallowing the light behind me. My room disappeared, and I was surrounded by nothing. I tried to move, but my legs barely responded. My breathing became loud and uneven, and panic took over completely. I forced myself forward, one step at a time, my hands shaking in front of me. Something screamed directly into my face. The sound was violent and overwhelming, and pain exploded across my skin. I felt claws tear into my arms, my neck, my face. I screamed and swung wildly, hitting nothing. I ran blindly, crashing into furniture and walls, tripping and falling until I slammed into my bedroom door. I forced it shut and locked it, flipping the light on with shaking hands. The room was normal again, but I wasn't. Blood ran down my arms and deep scratches burned across my skin. My shirt was torn and my hands shook so badly I could barely hold my phone. Before calling anyone, I listened. The hallway light was back on. Everything looked normal through the crack under the door, like nothing had happened at all. I called my mom, crying so hard I could barely speak. She answered from work, confused and scared, telling me she had never left the hospital and never spoken to me. She came home as fast as she could, and when she arrived, she found me sitting on my bed shaking and bleeding. She hugged me tightly and didn't let go. We checked the house together. Every door was locked, every window was closed. There was no sign of anyone else being there. The scratches healed, but the fear didn't. My mom stopped taking night shifts after that. She believed something happened, even if she didn't understand it. I don't stay alone anymore. Lights stay on all night, and my bedroom door stays open. I live alone in a small house that looks normal from the outside and feels too quiet on the inside. It has 2 floors, narrow stairs, and an attic I rarely used because I never needed the space. After the breakup, I stayed because moving felt harder than dealing with the silence. My nights were quiet enough to convince me that nothing was wrong. Living alone forces you to trust your memory, even when it fails you. You assume objects stay where you leave them and food disappears because you consumed it. You rely on logic because fear feels irrational when nothing obvious has happened. That belief lasted until small details started breaking that logic, slowly and quietly, without giving me a clear moment to react. The first thing I noticed was food missing from the fridge, and at first I blamed myself without hesitation. A yogurt was gone, then slices of bread, and later leftovers I clearly remembered saving for the next day. A few days later, objects were not where I always left them, and that pattern was harder to ignore. My mug wasn't in the sink, my shoes weren't lined up by the door, the remote control had moved from the couch to the table. These were small things, but they were consistent, and consistency made them harder to dismiss. At night, I started paying attention to sounds I used to ignore. The house made noises before, but now they felt deliberate. The ceiling creaked once, then again, spaced apart, careful enough to feel controlled. I stayed in bed staring at the dark, counting seconds, waiting for the noise to return. I called the police after a week of this. Explaining it out loud made me feel ridiculous, and their reaction confirmed it. They checked everything, including the attic, and found nothing unusual. They told me to call again if something more serious happened. Then they left me alone with a house that no longer felt empty. After that visit, fear stopped being an idea and became a constant presence. I couldn't relax in my own house because I didn't trust what I couldn't see. I started checking locks multiple times, not because I forgot, but because I needed confirmation that reality still worked the way it was supposed to. Before going to sleep, I stood in the hallway every night, listening to the house breathe. I waited for sounds, knowing that waiting itself was exhausting, but stopping felt worse. My body stayed tense, ready to react, even though I had no plan if something happened. One morning, I found the kitchen faucet open, slowly filling the sink. I never leave it like that. Next to it was an open package of cookies I didn't remember buying. I stood there frozen, staring at the water in the plastic wrapper, feeling my chest tighten as the realization hit me that someone else knew where things were in my house. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed in bed with my phone in my hand, jumping at every sound, replaying the image of that open faucet in my head. Around 3 a.m, I heard movement above me, heavier than before, slow and careful, like someone adjusting their position to avoid making noise. I pressed my hand against my mouth to stop myself from making a sound because fear had fully taken control by then, and every part of me knew that whatever was happening was inside the house. I bought indoor cameras the next day because fear demanded proof. I needed to see something real, something undeniable, because my mind was spiraling faster than I could control. I placed cameras in the living room, the kitchen, and the hallway, making sure they covered the spaces I used the most. Before midnight, I heard something from above, followed by a dry cough that was unmistakably human. My heart dropped so hard it felt like my body shut down for a second. I stood up shaking, listening for it to happen again, praying it wouldn't. I grabbed a knife and moved through the house with slow steps, checking every room, knowing how weak and exposed I was. When I returned to my phone, my hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. That's when I saw movement on the hallway camera. The attic door was open, and a man was climbing into it with slow, practiced movements, as if he had done it many times before. I couldn't see his face, but his body language was calm, controlled, and familiar with the space, which terrified me more than aggression ever could. Fear pushed me toward the attic before logic could stop me. I didn't believe the police would arrive in time, and I couldn't accept the idea that he might disappear again. My legs felt weak as I climbed the ladder, every sound echoing too loudly in my head. When I turned on the attic light, the space revealed itself piece by piece, and every detail made my stomach turn. Towels hung from wooden beams. Blankets were arranged into a sleeping area. Food wrappers were stacked neatly, not hidden, but organized. This wasn't temporary, this was intentional. Before I could process it, I heard breathing behind the boxes, slow and steady, like someone waiting. He stepped out and recognition hit me instantly. It was my ex. The man who said he accepted the breakup. The man who said he needed time. He started talking, his voice shaking with emotion, saying he wasn't ready to let go, that he needed to stay close, that this was easier than losing me. His words poured out fast and desperate, and every sentence made my fear grow heavier. He wasn't apologetic, he wasn't ashamed, he believed he belonged there, and that belief was more terrifying than any threat he could have made. I knew I had to leave the house or something worse would happen. My hands were shaking and my breathing was out of control as I moved through the hallway toward the front door. I could hear him behind me. His steps were slow, he didn't touch me, but I knew he was close. Too close. He started talking softly, using my name, telling me how much he loved me. He said he had waited for this and that we were meant to be together. The way he spoke made my skin crawl because he sounded honest. When I reached the door, my hands slipped on the key. I was sweating, terrified, barely able to stand. I felt his fingers touch my hair, slow and careful, as he asked me not to go and told me we could be happy together. I forced the key to turn, opened the door, and ran outside as fast as I could. He didn't stop me, he didn't chase me, he stayed inside. The police explained everything afterward, including how he used old keys and knew my routine well enough to avoid being seen. He moved only when I was asleep or gone, and he cleaned up after himself to stay invisible. It wasn't an attack, it was control through presence, and knowing that made it impossible to feel safe again. I called the police from across the street, shaking and crying, unable to look away from the house. He was still there when they arrived, waiting like he knew this would happen. The police went inside and brought him out in handcuffs. He didn't fight, he looked calm. When he saw me, he smiled, like we shared something no one else understood. An officer told me he had been hiding in the house for weeks and knew exactly when I would be alone. That information hit harder than anything else that night. They took him away, but I know he won't be gone forever. One day he will be free again, and I'm scared that when he comes back, he will still believe I belong to him. In 2010, a woman in Chicago discovered that her ex-partner had been secretly living inside her home after their separation. Unable to accept the breakup, the man never fully left the house, instead hiding in a concealed space and moving only when she was asleep or away. For weeks, she noticed small disturbances, missing food, objects out of place, unexplained noises, but dismissed them as stress. The situation was uncovered when she realized someone else was accessing the house without forcing entry, confirming that she had never truly been alone.
I adopted the parrot on a weekday afternoon because the shelter was almost full and I needed noise in my apartment. I wasn't searching for anything unusual, only a living presence that would break the routine of coming home to silence every night. The shelter worker gave me a thin folder with very little information and said the previous owner was deceased. She avoided explaining further and seemed eager to move on. The parrot looked older than the others, with eyes that followed every movement without rest. He didn't panic when I approached the cage, and he didn't vocalize at all, which felt wrong for a bird in that environment. He simply watched me, calm and focused, like he was waiting to be taken somewhere specific. At home, I placed the cage near the kitchen and tried talking to him while unpacking groceries. He listened carefully, but stayed silent, reacting only by shifting his posture slightly. That silence stayed with me longer than it should have, making the apartment feel smaller than usual. That night he barely slept and kept moving inside his cage, scratching the bars and repositioning himself over and over. I told myself it was normal adjustment behavior, but the constant noise kept me awake and alert. Even then, I had no idea how deeply this animal was connected to something violent. The first few days passed with an uncomfortable calm that never fully settled. I fed him, cleaned the cage, and tried to teach him simple words, but he refused to repeat anything new. He reacted more to certain sounds, especially when my voice became tense or louder, which made me aware of my own anxiety. On the third day, while washing dishes, he spoke clearly for the first time. "Don't shoot!" The words were slow and controlled, not distorted or playful, and they stopped me completely. I stood frozen with my hands under the water, trying to understand what I had just heard. I laughed nervously and tried to rationalize it, reminding myself that parrots repeat things they hear without understanding. Still, the phrase stuck in my head for the rest of the day, repeating itself even when the parrot stayed silent. That night I slept poorly, replaying the moment again and again. The next morning he said it again while I walked past his cage. "Don't shoot!" There was no trigger or reason, and my chest tightened immediately. That was when I realized this was not random mimicry, and the discomfort turned into something heavier. Before contacting the police, I recorded everything, my hands shaking while holding my phone close to the cage. The parrot spoke steadily, repeating the same phrases without reacting to the camera. I started feeling watched, even when I was alone in the apartment. At the police station, the officer dismissed my concerns at first, smiling as if I was wasting his time. That reaction made my fear worse because I knew I would leave without protection. I returned home feeling exposed and vulnerable, constantly checking my surroundings. 2 days later, I noticed a dark sedan parked across the street when I left work. The engine was running, and the driver didn't look away when I glanced in his direction. I told myself it was nothing, but the same car appeared again that evening, this time closer to my building. That night, The parrot spoke with urgency. You are a liar! Don't shoot! My heart raced as I locked every door and window, realizing someone else might know about the bird and what he was saying. Before the attack, there was a long walk home where I felt exposed on the sidewalk, constantly checking behind me. When I reached the intersection near my building, the dark sedan appeared again, accelerating suddenly towards me. The car swerved onto the sidewalk without warning, forcing me to jump aside and fall hard onto the pavement. I scraped my hands and knees while the vehicle sped past me, missing me by inches. My breathing became frantic as I struggled to stand. I watched the car disappear down the street, my body shaking uncontrollably. I knew this was intentional and connected to the parrot. Someone wanted to stop whatever truth was coming out. When I reached my apartment, the parrot repeated the phrase louder than ever. Don't shoot! Glenna! Stop! I sat on the floor next to the cage, realizing I was being hunted because of him. Before the break-in, I barely slept for days, jumping at every sound and keeping lights on at night. I started carrying the parrot's cage with me from room to room, refusing to leave him alone. One night, I woke up to the sound of glass breaking in the living room. My heart slammed against my chest as I realized someone was inside my apartment. I didn't scream or freeze, acting on pure panic instead. I rushed to the parrot, grabbed the cage, and locked us both inside the bathroom. I turned off the light and held my breath while footsteps moved through the apartment.
Where is it?
The woman's voice was low and angry, and I covered my mouth to stop myself from making noise. The door handle rattled violently, and I knew I wouldn't survive a direct confrontation. I pressed the panic button on my phone with shaking fingers, and moments later, the footsteps retreated rapidly. The apartment fell silent again. I stayed locked in the bathroom until the police arrived, holding the cage and trying to keep my breathing under control. The officers found clear signs of forced entry, which confirmed that someone had been inside the apartment, looking for the parrot. The officers documented everything carefully, asking me the same question several times while taking photographs. For the first time, I felt that they understood this was not paranoia or coincidence, but a pattern that was becoming harder to ignore. After that night, the police began treating the parrot's phrases as a lead rather than an answer. They reviewed old case files, rehacked timelines, compared the bird's repeated words with existing evidence that had been overlooked or dismissed years earlier. The phrases alone proved nothing, but they pointed investigators towards contradictions in witness statements and gaps in the original investigation. They connected the phrases to the murder of Martin Hale and identified Glenna, his wife, as the primary suspect. The parrot reacted strongly when her name was mentioned, repeating phrases that matched old recordings from the case. Glenna, stop! Glenna, stop! When Glenna's name came up again, it was not because of the parrot alone, but because the renewed attention exposed inconsistencies in her version of events and connections that had never been fully explored. The bird reacted when her name was spoken, repeating familiar fragments, but this time the officers didn't focus on the animal. They focused on what the evidence finally showed, using the parrot only as the reason they had taken a second look. After everything ended, the parrot stopped repeating the phrases entirely. He behaved like a normal pet, learning harmless words and sleeping peacefully through the night. I still lock my doors carefully and avoid walking alone after dark. The fear didn't disappear, but it became manageable. I keep the cage open now, and the parrot stays close. I stayed alive because I protected him, and that is something I will never forget. In 2015, Martin Durham was shot and killed in his home. His wife, Glenna Durham, was found injured at the scene and later claimed it was a murder-suicide attempt, but she survived. The incident allegedly took place in front of the bird, which was then placed in the care of Martin's ex-wife, Christina Keller. According to her, the animal has been constantly repeating the victim's last words, "Don't shoot." Prosecutors handling the case are now considering using these statements as evidence in the trial.
I live in a narrow duplex on the edge of town. The kind with thin walls and doors that never fully close unless you slam them. Christmas Eve was quiet. No music, no guests, no lights outside. I put my daughter to bed early because she had been restless all day, running on sugar and cartoons. I stayed up folding laundry and checking the locks more than once. The habit came from living alone with a kid, not from fear. At least, that's what I told myself. The house had its usual night noises. Pipes clicking, the fridge humming, wind pushing against the kitchen window. Nothing special. I turned off the lights and sat on the couch with my phone, scrolling without paying attention. I remember thinking I should go to sleep before midnight, but I didn't. I never do on Christmas Eve. I'm Marin. I'm not strong, not trained, not brave. I work retail and I'm tired most of the time. I don't believe in signs or destiny. I believe in locking doors and keeping routines because routines keep things stable. That night felt stable enough. Then I heard a sound that didn't fit. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a soft scrape like something being dragged slowly across tile. It came from the kitchen. I waited. I didn't move. I counted my breaths. The sound stopped. Then I heard a small voice behind me. Before I turned around, I already knew it was my daughter. I could hear her breathing. Too calm for a kid who just woke up from a dream. I stood up slowly and faced her. Lila was in the hallway, barefoot, holding her stuffed rabbit by one ear. I asked her why she was awake. She smiled and said Santa already came. Her voice was flat, like she was stating a fact, not trying to convince me. I told her Santa doesn't come until everyone's asleep. I guided her back toward her room. She pulled her arm away and told me to look. She pointed at the living room floor. There were boxes there, 3 of them, wrapped in paper I didn't own. Brown paper torn at the edges, tied with dirty string. They hadn't been there earlier. I knew exactly how the room looked before. I told her it was probably a prank, maybe from the neighbors. I said it fast to keep control of my voice. Lila shook her head. She said Santa was still here. She said he was in the kitchen. I didn't answer her. I took her hand and told her to stay behind me. I walked toward the kitchen entrance and stopped just before turning the corner. I listened. I could hear breathing, heavy and wet. Something else too. The sound of plastic bags being opened. I told Lila to go back to her room. She didn't move. I stood there for several seconds, staring at the wall, my hand pressed flat against it. I tried to think of a normal explanation. Someone drunk, someone confused, someone who would leave if I made a noise. My heart was already beating too fast. My mouth felt dry. I leaned forward, just enough to see the edge of the kitchen. The trash can was tipped over. Food scraps were spread across the floor. Banana peels, old bread, empty cans. Someone was crouched there, back toward me, wearing a red suit that didn't fit right. The fabric looked stiff and cheap. The white trim was gray with dirt. The man was eating, not fast, not desperate, slow like he had time. He picked things up, smelled them, then put them in his mouth. He chewed with his mouth open. I could hear it. I didn't speak. I didn't move. I felt Lila's fingers tighten around me. The man shifted his weight and stood up halfway. I saw his face in profile. His beard was fake, hanging loose on one side. His eyes were wide and unfocused. He smiled at the trash in his hand. This was the moment where I should have shouted or run. I didn't. I stepped into the kitchen. My foot brushed against the can. It rolled. The man turned fast. He didn't look surprised. He looked relieved. He grabbed a handful of garbage and rushed at me. He pushed it into my face, pressing it against my mouth. Rotten food, wet paper, something sharp cut my lip. He shoved harder, forcing my jaw open with his fingers. He started eating too, grabbing from the same pile, chewing and pushing more into my mouth at the same time. I tried to pull back. I slipped. I fell against the counter. He leaned over me, breathing hard, smiling. Lila started crying behind me. He kept pushing trash into my mouth, filling it, pressing until I gagged. I couldn't breathe through my nose. I tried to bite him. He laughed and pushed more. His hands shook, but he didn't stop. My chest burned. My throat hurt. I dropped to my knees trying to cough. He followed me down, grabbing another bag from the floor and tearing it open. He shoved it against my face, pressing the opening over my mouth and nose. I heard Lila screaming my name. I reached out for her without looking. My fingers scraped the floor. I couldn't get air. The bag smelled like rot and chemicals. He pressed his weight forward, using his shoulders to keep me down. Then the trash ran out. He looked around, confused. He shook the empty bag and dropped it. He stared at me like he was waiting for something. When I didn't move, he stood up. He started hitting the floor with his fists, hard, over and over. His breathing got fast. He made sounds that weren't words. He paced the kitchen, knocking over a chair, slamming his hand against the wall. I rolled onto my side and pulled air in. My head was spinning. I tasted blood and old food. I saw the knife block on the counter. I crawled toward it. Before grabbing it, I paused. My hands were shaking so bad I almost missed. I wrapped my fingers around the handle and stood up slowly, keeping the counter between us. I pointed the knife at him. My arm felt weak. I told him to leave. My voice came out broken. He didn't look at the knife. He kept hitting the floor. Then he ran past me, knocking into the doorframe and bolted out of the house. He didn't take anything with him. The house was silent again. I dropped the knife and ran to Lila. She was crouched against the wall, crying so hard she couldn't speak. I held her and checked her arms and legs. She wasn't hurt. I locked the door. I locked it again. I carried her to the bathroom and washed my mouth out until I started gagging again. I wiped her face and told her it was over. I didn't believe it. I called the police with shaking hands. I told them there was a man in a Santa costume who broke into my house. I told them what he did. I didn't try to explain why. I stayed on the line until I heard sirens. An officer arrived and checked the house. He stepped around the trash and the boxes. He asked me what was in the gifts. I hadn't looked. He opened one. Inside was a burnt toy, melted plastic. Another box had feces wrapped in paper towels. While they took my statement, another call came in. A man matching the description was found nearby. He was trying to get into another house. He wasn't wearing the costume anymore. He was in his underwear, screaming and hitting a door. They took him away. I didn't see him again. They cleaned the kitchen. They took pictures. They asked questions I couldn't answer. I signed papers with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Lila sat on the couch wrapped in a blanket, staring at the wall. Before leaving, one officer told me the man had a history. Hospital stays, delusions. He thought he was correcting children. He thought the garbage was a test. He thought punishment was part of the job. I slept with Lila that night. Neither of us really slept. Every sound made me tense. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt pressure on my face again. They fixed the door the next day. They replaced the lock. I threw out the trash can and everything in it. I scrubbed the floor until my knees hurt. Christmas passed without celebration. I didn't put the tree back up. I didn't explain Santa. I didn't need to. Weeks later, I saw the house where they caught him. The door had dents in it. The frame was cracked. I imagined him there, half naked, frantic, pounding to get in. Lila stopped asking about Santa. She started checking the kitchen before bed. I didn't stop her. I checked it too. Sometimes I still smell garbage when the room is clean. Sometimes I wake up coughing. I don't feel stronger. I don't feel like I want anything. I just feel like he ran out of trash.
On December 4th, 1997, in Bacon County, Georgia, Amber Daniels, just 10 years old, was kidnapped along with her sisters by someone dressed as Santa Claus. The girl risked her life to save her sisters, but tragedy took her parents. The killer was arrested a few days later and found guilty of the crimes. He is currently still in prison, and Amber is alive to tell her story. I was 11 years old, and that night started like any other night when our parents worked late. The three of us were in the same room because it was warmer and because our parents thought that kept us safer. The TV was off, the lights were off, and we were already in bed trying to sleep. Nora was 8 and June was 6, and they talked quietly until I told them to shut up because I wanted to sleep. The heater made a clicking sound every few minutes, and the clock in the hallway was loud enough to be annoying. Nothing else was happening. The window faced the street, and the curtains were thin, so headlights sometimes passed across the walls. That was normal and boring, and I didn't care about it. I wasn't thinking about danger or bad people or anything like that. There was a moment when everything went silent at once, including the heater, and that silence lasted longer than usual. I didn't panic, but my body stopped relaxing. I stayed awake, staring at the wall, waiting for the next sound. The tapping on the window was slow and controlled, not loud enough to wake an adult in the next room. It happened 3 times, then stopped, then happened again. I turned my head and saw my sisters were already awake and sitting up. A voice whispered our names from outside, using the same tone it always used when it talked to us before. That voice belonged to a family friend, someone we had known for years, someone our parents trusted without question. The curtain moved slightly and a face appeared behind the glass, framed by a Santa Claus costume that looked cheap and worn. He pressed a finger against his lips and told us to be quiet so nobody would wake up. Before he asked us to open the window, he explained that he had a surprise for us, and our parents wanted it that way. He spoke calmly and slowly like he wasn't worried about time. My sisters looked at me, waiting. I didn't stop it. I didn't say anything. I moved because they moved and because nothing in my head told me to scream or run yet. We climbed out through the window because he said the doors would make noise. The cold hit us immediately and I felt my hand shaking as soon as my feet touched the ground. His truck was parked right outside, engine off, lights off. Before we got in, he told us to stay low and not look around. He opened the doors quickly and closed them carefully. Everything about the way he moved was controlled and deliberate. Once the truck started moving, the streetlights disappeared fast and the road became narrow. Trees closed in on both sides and there were no houses anymore. The heater inside the truck was on high, blowing hot air that smelled old. June asked where we were going, and he answered without turning around. He said it was a shortcut and that we needed to behave. His voice was flat, without jokes or warmth. Before anything clearly went wrong, there was a long stretch of road where nothing happened at all. No music, no talking, no lights. That silence made the fear settle in slowly, without warning. The truck suddenly swerved hard to the side and stopped so fast that our bodies slammed forward. June cried out and Nora hit her head against the window. The engine stayed on loud and aggressive in the silence. He turned around in his seat and screamed at us to shut up, his face red and twisted, spit flying from his mouth as he yelled inches away from us. He slammed his hand against the dashboard again and again, asking if we wanted to ruin everything. My body locked up completely. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't even look away. I was sure he was going to hit one of us or pull the gun right there and end it inside the truck. Then, just as fast, he stopped. He took a deep breath, fixed his jacket, and spoke calmly again, telling us he was sorry and that we just scared him. He smiled and started driving like nothing had happened, leaving us shaking in our seats. He slowed down near a bridge and pulled the truck underneath it, where the concrete blocked the moonlight. The engine stopped and the sudden quiet felt violent. He told us to stay inside and got out. From the back window, I watched him open a metal toolbox in the truck bed. He moved things aside quickly, like he knew exactly where everything was. He took out a knife and slid it into his jacket. Then he took out a handgun, checked it, and tucked it away. He didn't rush, he didn't hesitate. That was the moment everything became real and irreversible. Before he got back in, my chest felt tight and my mouth went dry. I knew we were in serious danger, but I still didn't know what to do. I was a kid, standing still, watching an adult prepare. He opened the door and told us to get out. He said it slowly and clearly, explaining that if we screamed or ran, bad things would happen to our parents. His hand stayed close to his jacket the entire time. He lined us up near the edge of the bridge and told us to walk forward. The water below was loud and fast and the cold air cut through our clothes. My legs shook and I struggled to stay upright. Before anything exploded, he kept talking, explaining rules and consequences, like this was something he had rehearsed. Every word made the situation worse because it meant he was in control. Nora tripped and fell, and when he grabbed her by the hair to pull her up, she screamed loudly and suddenly. That scream broke whatever control he had over the moment. June ran the second his attention shifted. She sprinted toward the road without looking back. He cursed and chased her immediately, leaving us alone for a brief moment. I didn't think about it. I grabbed Nora's arm and ran toward the edge of the bridge. The ground disappeared beneath us and the fall came faster than expected. The impact with the water knocked the air out of me and sent pain through my entire body. I sank, swallowed water, and thrashed until I broke the surface, coughing and choking. Nora surfaced close by and grabbed onto me, panicking and crying. We kicked toward the bank with whatever strength we had left, fighting the current the entire way. We crawled out soaking and shaking, then ran without stopping through the trees and mud until we saw a house with one light on. We banged on the door until someone answered and called the police. The police found him days later. He didn't resist, he didn't explain, he never said where June was. When they took us home, our parents were already dead. Years later, one of the officers told us what they found in the house that night. He had gone there first, hours before he came for us, while the street was quiet and nobody was watching. He knew the layout, knew where the noise traveled, knew how long it would take. He didn't come through the front door because he didn't need to. He had already been inside earlier and he didn't want us walking past rooms we shouldn't see. The window kept the house quiet and kept the lie intact. By the time he left, the house was already empty in the only way that mattered. When he came for us dressed as Santa, there was nobody left inside to wake up. I'm older now, but that night never left my body. Nora and I don't talk about it unless we have to. December still feels wrong. People ask how we trusted him. The answer is simple. He was familiar, and familiarity feels safe until it isn't. June was never found. That absence is heavier than everything else combined. It's the part that never ends. I didn't survive because I was brave. I survived because of timing and luck. That's the truth, and it's not comforting at all.
I worked as Santa Claus in the Central Square for 5 years. It was a paid gig during December, nothing heroic. I was a carpenter the rest of the year. I fixed doors, built shelves, repaired playgrounds for free when they broke. People trusted me. Kids hugged me without thinking twice. Parents left their phones on the bench next to me. That mattered in a town this small. The costume belonged to the county. Same red suit, same fake beard, same boots that smelled like plastic and sweat. I didn't care. It paid well and it made people smile. I sat on the chair, listened to kids list things their parents couldn't afford, nodded, kept it short. No speeches, no magic, just doing the job. That year, the square looked bigger than usual. More lights, more stalls. Someone put a massive wooden reindeer near the stage. I noticed the antlers were hand-carved, not factory-made. Clean cuts, patient work. I remember thinking whoever made that knew what they were doing. 3 days before Christmas Eve, the first letter showed up in my mailbox. No stamp, no name, just a folded piece of paper with block letters. It said I shouldn't wear the suit this year. Nothing else. I threw it out. The second letter arrived the next morning. Same paper, same handwriting. This one said the town was making a mistake. It said traditions shouldn't be faked. It didn't ask. It warned. I showed it to my sister. She laughed and told me someone was trying to scare me for fun. The third letter came the day after. This one was different. Shorter, angrier. It said there was a reason sacrifices stopped. It said people forgot. I folded it and put it in my pocket. I still went to work. I still fixed a broken door for an old couple that afternoon. On Christmas Eve, another note was waiting inside my truck. That one had pressure marks, like whoever wrote it leaned hard on the pen. It said I was standing in the wrong place. I didn't show anyone. I didn't want the police involved over paper threats. Before leaving my house that night, I stood in the kitchen holding the Santa hat. I checked my phone. Missed calls from the event coordinator. Kids were already lining up. I told myself this was nothing, just someone unbalanced. I put the hat on and left. The alley behind the stage was narrow and dark, blocked on both ends by metal fences and stacked decorations. Fake snow machines hummed somewhere. I walked slower there. The suit limited my steps. The boots were slick. I stopped for a second, not because I sensed anything, but because I needed to catch my breath. The beard itched. Sweat ran down my neck. I adjusted the belt. That pause mattered. Something hit me from the side. Hard. Wood against ribs. I fell forward and my shoulder slammed into a crate. Before I could get up, another blow landed on my back. Precise, not wild. I tried to turn, but my boot got caught under a cable. The mask was the first thing I saw when I looked up. A carved reindeer face. Real wood. Eye holes clean cut. The antlers were short, but sharp at the tips. The person wearing it didn't rush. They stepped closer and raised the weapon again. "You are not the chosen one!" The blow landed on my arm. I felt something crack. I screamed. Not a shout. A broken sound. I rolled and the next hit missed my head by inches. The attacker adjusted immediately and kicked my side. I couldn't breathe. The mask leaned closer. "You are not the chosen one." I tried to crawl. My glove tore at the ground. Another hit landed on my leg. I felt heat and then nothing there. Someone screamed nearby. The attacker stepped back once, like checking time, then ran. I stayed there bleeding, staring at the wooden antlers disappearing between red lights and plastic trees. I woke up in the hospital with my arm in a cast and my ribs wrapped tight. The doctor told me I was lucky. Broken arm, cracked ribs, deep bruises. If one hit landed higher, I wouldn't be there. The police asked questions. I told them everything. The letters, the mask, the phrase. They had nothing. Too many people, too many costumes. The attacker blended in. Someone thought it was part of a show at first. The town canceled the rest of the event. Decorations came down overnight. People stayed inside. Parents called the school asking questions nobody could answer. I stayed in bed, watching the ceiling. 2 days later, an old man came to see me. His name was Walter. He said he knew the mask. He said he knew who did it. He didn't say the name out loud. He said he used to belong to the same group. Before he spoke more, he closed the door and checked the hallway. His hand shook. He told me this wasn't about me. Not really. He said I was in the way. Walter talked slow, like saying it too fast would bring something back. He said decades ago, before the square, before the fair, the town followed a winter ritual. Not church, not folklore for tourists. Something smaller and stricter. Every December 25th, one man was chosen, dressed, honored, then taken away. It was called protection. Ice storms used to kill people here. Crops failed, roads disappeared under snow. After the sacrifices started, the winters softened. Walter said it stopped when outsiders arrived, when the town grew, when no one wanted blood on holidays anymore. The records were hidden in the library basement. Old town council notes, buried, not destroyed. He leaned closer to my bed and told me the costume mattered. Not the Santa part, the role. A man loved by everyone, visible, trusted. The mask wasn't random. It was carved the same way as the old ones. You are not the chosen one. Walter said the attacker believed the spirit was coming back. He believed the winter would punish the town. He wasn't trying to kill me fast. He was trying to stop a replacement, to reset the cycle. That night, someone broke into the hospital storage room. They didn't come to my floor. They took nothing important, just tools, wood chisels. The police didn't connect it. The attacker was caught 2 nights later in the library basement. He didn't run. He was carving another mask when they found him. Smaller, cleaner, finished. The antlers were longer. They brought him past my room in handcuffs. I didn't want to look. I did anyway. He turned his head as much as the cuffs allowed. You are not the chosen one. They said he didn't resist. Said his name didn't matter. Said he smiled when they told him winter was mild that year. Walter disappeared after that. Nobody found him. I didn't go back to the square. Someone else wore the suit the next year, a volunteer from another town. Nothing happened. No storms, no sacrifices. I quit the Santa job. I went back to carpentry. People still waved. Some avoided eye contact. The reindeer decoration never returned. The town said it was damaged in storage. Sometimes I get mail with no return address. Blank paper, no words, just pressure marks where something heavy rested on it. Every December 25th, I stay inside. I lock the door. I listen to the weather report. It's not like I believe something is going to happen. But the fear never really leaves. You are not the chosen one.